so from his external vest carrier was the actual microphone that would activate his camera. We found the microphone on the hood of the defendant's vehicle, say between the windshield wipers and the windshield. It was in it was in that area there, and when our cameras are activated, the best way to take a look at it is a DVR that you have at your house. You come home and you want to watch a TV show, but you missed the first 10 minutes of it. If your DVR has a look-back feature, you hit the look-back feature and it restarts your show from the beginning. Well, what's happening with the DVR is that the DVR is recording all of those shows. And it's waiting for you to press a button to tell it to go back and I want to watch this show. The same thing is happening with our camera. Our camera is always recording a video. It's always recording, waiting for us to trigger the button. So when we trigger the button, it locks, say approximately a 90-second area of video that happened immediately prior to the triggering of the lights, the belt microphones, and everything like that. So it keeps the buffer or that pre-video locked in, waiting for a trigger. And then when it triggers, it locks that, and then that becomes part of the video. Well, what happened here was we had a trigger that was based upon so the microphone button, say from Trooper Velez's say microphone being depressed as it lay on the windshield say of the defendant's car. Now we knew it say because of sound, because you could hear the windshield wipers going back and forth on the
actively on when this mic hit the windshield.
The audio that you hear is the windshield wipers going back and forth.
Okay. And the 90-second buffer, is there sound to that?
There is not. The buffer will only record video. The buffer does not record audio.
Did you do anything else, officer?
So we had talked about the difference of photographs in between the reconstruction section and the plainclothes section. I took the photographs for the reconstruction section while I was out there.
And did you also help open 90 back up?
Yes, I did.
Were you the last officer to clear that scene?
I was.
Okay. So, with crash reconstruction, does your role stop on scene?
No, it just starts.
Okay. Now, do you guys compile a report once you're done with everything with crash reconstruction?
Yes, we do.
And does pieces of this report have your work in it?
Yes, it does.
And what was your role in the report?
My role from the report was looking into the Trooper Velez's background, and also trying to get some of the background information about his career, about his activity, and about what he had done that day. Because one of the things that I had always stressed about the troopers was on any crash that you handle, especially a fatal crash, you want to be able to track back what the parties had done throughout the day. So crashes are the culmination of a variety of different things. It's actually put to me in the training before that tragedies happen as the confluence of things all line up with one another. You know, the Titanic wouldn't have been a tragedy if one thing for the confluence of events had not lined up. If they had had enough lifeboats, if they had had waterproof doors, if they had had this, if one of those things had lined up, you didn't have the tragedy that you have. So what we see when we look back on things is that you start to see the see the confluence of things that start to line
he was still out there working.
Yes, ma'am.
So, what was he like as a road trooper? Did he, I mean, at rush hour, is he pulling people over for going 66 miles an hour, up 77?
Sustained.
Did Trooper Velez work that area on 90 frequently?
He did.
And did he use this technique of flagging frequently?
So from what I could see, from what I was able to look back, I was able to identify four instances prior to this crash that there was specific documentation or a video that he had flagged over vehicles at this specific location.
What was the average speed at that location that Trooper Velez would ticket?
It was approximately 76 miles an hour.
Did you also note Trooper Velez's activity on the date of September 15, 2016?
I did.
Okay. Does he come on duty at 5:25?
Approximately, yes.
And what does he do when he comes on duty?
So he came on duty. The next thing that we had was him activating. So one of the things that we're required to do for our policy is to activate our camera to do a check to make sure that it's functioning. So the next thing we had him doing was activating his belt microphone to do a check of the audiovisual system for his vehicle. He did that, and then that video terminated when he arrived on post at approximately say 0550 hours. So his tour duty started at 6 a.m.
And was he doing normal patrol initially?
Yes. There was an hour there. Say where his stuff was coded as unit follow-up, where so he's basically compiling the things that he couldn't get to at the end of his last shift. He was following up with the stuff that he needed to do for today. There's no specific documentation for what actually he did during the hour time there, but so one of the duties that he did have was that he was one of the primary units that would relay affidavits or tickets from the post to the various courts that were throughout the area. We have a bunch of courts that are in Cuyahoga County, and we have to get the tickets out there. So one of Trooper Velez's duties as a day shift unit was to relay citations to the courts.
So after he does that, what does he do?
He left the post, and the first thing that he did was he went to the Justice Center here, to relay affidavits, to Cleveland Municipal Court.
And then 9:08, does he start working the road?
Yes.
And is he in that area of I-90 westbound?
He made 3 traffic stops, say within that area, say within the next hour and a half to 2 hours. They were at milepost 168, and all 3 of the traffic stops, they were for a speeding violation.
Do you remember how he initiated those stops?
The stops, so one of the stops was actually called off by another trooper that he was working with. So the other trooper had checked the speed of a vehicle and actually radioed to Trooper Velez that I had checked this vehicle. So Trooper Velez had made that traffic stop for the one. The first stop that he made, the vehicle actually stopped partially in the left-hand lane of I-90. And after his initial approach, he had told the vehicle to move off to the right-hand side of the road because you obviously don't want to be stopped in the left-hand lane of I-90. So he moved the vehicle off onto the right-hand shoulder, conducted the traffic stop. So the other 2 citations were both for speed, but they both resulted from the same area. There was a grassy crossover at milepost 168 that he sat in. There was what.
Just a
clarify, when you're saying the left was not safe, is this 4 miles away from where Ken was ultimately struck?
Yes, it was.
And in that area, is there a wide median available?
There is, and the reason why he moved him was the vehicle stopped in the lane of travel. Because the next stop that he made, the vehicle pulled completely off of the shoulder, and the stop was conducted as normal there. So they're on the left-hand shoulder, but he specifically moved that vehicle because that vehicle had stopped, so partially in the left-hand lane of travel.
Does he stay in that location?
He stays there, say for those 3 traffic stops. So the last traffic stop that he makes, so there's a conversation, say between he and us, Trooper Cirillo, where they're discussing lunch plans. So they go and they have lunch with one another. They clear lunch, and then the next thing, so say the Trooper Velez did was he had to go to as Parma Juvenile Court to file charges, say for another unit. So he was en route from his lunch break over to that court to file charges. While he was on his way there, he made another traffic stop, but gave the person a warning. So there's nothing there for me to extrapolate about what was going on for the stop. He arrives at Parma Juvenile Court. He clears there at approximately 11:30. Then goes back up to Interstate 90, where he makes another traffic stop for speed.
Is that at milepost 168 again?
Yes, ma'am.
When do you know from all of your resources, did Ken move to milepost 164?
The last thing that we had input-wise, say from his mobile computer terminal, was clearing the traffic stop that he made at milepost 168, the last say traffic stop there. The last input we had from him so was at 12:35 when he ran a registration check. So it cleared the stop, had made a registration check, and then the next time that the camera activates was for the collision. And last radio traffic last transmission from his mobile computer terminal.
So what time does the camera kick on to catch the collision?
So they're approximately 12:48.
And then what is the last thing you noted as part of Ken's day? Do you remember?
The last thing I noted was the collision that took place. The last thing was the collision that took place that was captured on the cruiser video.
Do you also note about an unknown voice, later also known as Lawrence Mikla, now coming over the radio?
Yes. That I was the last radio transmission that came from Trooper Velez's vehicle. Yes, that the unknown voice says that when we key up our radios, the dispatchers would know what radio from what vehicle had keyed up. So the dispatchers had noted that the last key up from the vehicle was the unknown voice that had radioed to us that a trooper had been struck.
So 10 shift started at 6. Do you guys work 8-hour shifts?
Yes, ma'am.
Was he about an hour away from going home?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you do anything else in terms of this report?
No, ma'am.
Just one minute here.
Nothing else, Your Honor. Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Hi, sir. How you doing?
Good, thank you. My name is John Sin. I'm going to ask you some questions. If I ask anything you don't understand, you just ask me to rephrase it. Okay?
Absolutely.
Sir, this process of flagging down cars, is that what we call that?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Is that a policy of the OSP that patrolmen or troopers are
Objection, Your Honor.
permitted to flag down cars in this manner?
Yes.
Okay. So is that taught in your academy to get out of your car and aim at other cars?
There's no specific training class
Okay.
that deals with that. It's a kind of more of the on-the-job training.
Okay. And you're not required to wear any special uniforms or anything like that?
No,
You don't have to wear like an orange safety vest or anything?
it's not this time. No.
That's changed since Trooper Velez was killed, hasn't it?
It has changed, yes, sir.
Now, if you're going to do that, you have to wear an orange vest?
So when you're outside of your vehicle conducting traffic enforcement, you have to wear the issued vest the vest that we're given, yes, sir.
And that change was made in direct response to this accident.
Do you know?
I don't know.
Do you know
No.
when that change came about? When?
It was shortly after this collision, yes.
Now, isn't it inherently dangerous to be outside of your patrol vehicle on these fast lanes of traffic?
It's dangerous to be out there while we're inside of our vehicle.
Okay. But would you think it's more dangerous to be outside the vehicle?
That's it's a kind of a blanket statement sometimes, because sometimes you can evade things when you're standing outside of a vehicle. Sometimes it's sort of a blanket statement to say that it's
Right.
always it's always it's a dangerous place to be in, regardless of.
I hear you, but sometimes people say, I don't wear a seatbelt because I won't be able to get out of the car if I drown. But still, we encourage seatbelts, right?
Yes, sir.
Because in general, it's a lot safer to have the seatbelt on than not to. Right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes. Mhm.
Now, I mean, as far as the danger out there of being outside the car, I guess the danger would be how do you indicate to drivers that your intentions? How do they recognize these hand signals?
That's what. So when I would conduct the flagging, I would point at a car.
Isn't there a danger that when you point at a car, they misinterpret that and just stop?
That's a danger when we turn our lights on too, that they just come to a dead stop.
Right, but wouldn't it be true that most folks are a little more used to having patrol lights as opposed to a trooper actually on the side of the road pointing at them?
That if you're asking if the more common way the way to stop a vehicle would be to get behind it to turn lights on, then absolutely that's the most common. That's statistically speaking the most common way. Way that you would stop a car. Yes, that happens far more often than a flagging operation. Yes.
Now, did you have an opportunity to go back and watch all the prior stops the trooper made that day?
I did.
Did he do any other stops using this flagging technique?
He did not.
Okay, so the only stop he did with the flagging technique was the last one.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Even in the first stop, how did he execute that first stop that he did?
So pulled out of the crossover. So got behind the vehicle, turned his lights on. The vehicle stopped partially in the as a left-hand lane to travel.
Okay.
And then he approached the vehicle, and then had moved them over to the right-hand side.
How did he approach your vehicle? He got out of his vehicle?
Yes.
Okay. So even earlier this day, Trooper Velez has an individual stopped in the fast lane of 90, just stop there, and he gets out of his vehicle at that time and approaches. Do you agree with me that that whole situation is just inherently bad news? It's dangerous.
It's bad all around for everybody. Yes.
Isn't there a loudspeaker in the car that you can tell people pull over?
Yes, there is.
Okay, he chose not to use that?
So my experience for that, when you're sitting out there, the loudspeaker is not my preferred method of telling somebody to move over.
At least with the first stop, though, he's got the flashing lights and everything, right?
Yes, sir.
And he's actually behind that car. Really, his car is providing some kind of block for that car, right?
Yes.
Is that a policy you guys use to put your own vehicle between yourself and traffic so that if somebody does do something crazy, they're going to hit your car, not you?
It's uses one of our some methods of traffic control. Yes.
Okay. And it sounds like a good idea, right? To put a barrier between yourself and oncoming traffic.
Yes.
And in the first stop of the day, Trooper Velez did that. He left his patrol car in the fast lane of I-90, or did he get off to the berm? I'm sorry, let me go slower for you, sir. I apologize, Barry. In the first stop of the day, car stops dead on 90, fast lane, just like happened on the last stop of the day, correct? I mean, as far as car stopping in that lane.
The last stop of the last stop of the day is kind of an anomaly because there was an impact that took place. But the first stop of the day stopped in the lane of I-90. Yes.
And does Trooper Velez put his car behind that car in the lane and then exit his vehicle, or does he go to the berm and then exit the vehicle?
The right berm, or
I guess.
So I believe that he stops behind the vehicle, he approaches, and then they both move off to the side.
So at that point, you've got two cars now stopped in the lane.
Yes.
But at least when Trooper Velez approaches the car in front of him, he's got his car there to protect him.
Well, protect everybody.
Theoretically, though, if somebody comes up and says, holy cow, there's cars stopped in the lane, and they smack into you, they're going to hit his patrol car as opposed to hitting him.
Yes.
Well, the last stop of the day, Trooper Velez didn't use his car as a shield when executing that last flagging signal, did he?
Well, you're talking about two different situations there. The traffic stop, the first traffic stop that we're talking about, that was the methodology that he had used to initiate the traffic stop. He had used his patrol car to initiate the traffic stop for the first one. For the striking violation, whatever that one, he had got out and he was attempting to gesture to a vehicle to pull over and stay to the side. Now, obviously, I can't testify to what he was going to do after that, but when we typically make those kind of gesturings and movements, the next thing is us getting back inside of our cruiser, so turning on our lights and then reapproaching the vehicle afterwards.
Okay. Now, you're part of the accident reconstruction.
Yes, sir.
And so you really have a good idea of where, as best as possible, is where Trooper Velez was and where his vehicle was and where the other cars were, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is it safe to say that Trooper Velez's car was not struck at this time?
I don't believe his vehicle was struck. No.
So we can take from that had Trooper Velez been in his car, he could not have been struck at this time, or he would not have been struck based on this accident.
That's true. Yes.
And had Trooper Velez stayed behind his car and used his car as a block, as he did earlier in the day, he would not have been struck in this accident.
Well, he was behind his car, but not immediately behind his car, but he was behind his car when he was struck.
I guess he was behind his car as far as where he was situated in the roadway, but his car was not positioned between himself and the lane of traffic.
No.
He was positioned closest to the lane of traffic.
Yes, he was.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Lieutenant, you said that there was a sound of windshield wipers. What vehicle?
The defendant's vehicle, sir.
When you pull somebody over, do you loudspeaker to them for their license number?
No, ma'am.
Do you loudspeaker to them for their insurance card?
No, ma'am.
In every single traffic stop that's initiated, does the trooper have to get out of the car?
Yes.
So the only difference in this collision is the timing of the stop when Ken got out of his car.
Yes.
Okay.
There are times when we use our loudspeaker to say to do things, but I'm not normal traffic stop operations, no ma'am.
My point being, do you always have to get out of the car?
Yes.
So is there always a risk of this happening in every single traffic stop that you initiate?
Yes, ma'am.
Do cops get shot at?
Yes.
Do they then stop responding to gun calls?
No.
Does Cleveland Police still patrol the unsafe neighborhoods?
Yes.
Is that inherently dangerous?
Yes.
Is your job as a trooper inherently dangerous?
Yes, ma'am.
Or are you going to stop doing that?
Nope.
Mr. Sin asked you if you were familiar with the location Ken was in when he was struck. Was Ken in the median or was Ken in the lane of travel?
Say by median, you mean the area that is outside of the land. The median for that area is a solid concrete wall, say with a little bit of grass that's between it. But say between the median and the travel portion of the roadway, there's a paved shoulder. So Trooper Velez was in the paved shoulder. So he was not in the Elena travel, but he was also not beyond the concrete wall or in the grassy area for the median.
I see. Now, Lieutenant, you mentioned, was this area used frequently for flagging by the Highway Patrol?
I'm not specifically aware that it's a common area, but when I looked at Trooper Velez's citations and one of the other videos that was contained on his video card, there was video of him flagging. They had that. To the exact location, and so like I said before, I had documentation. So from the previous citations, I had pulled up his citations and I had read the comments and read aloud the older ones for any kind of documentation that he had done this, say in the past, for that location, and had found 3 other times that he had done it at so that specific location.
Was he struck and killed in any of those?
No, he was not.
I mean, is flagging something that is commonly used by the patrol in areas where you can't run a laser?
Well, it's typically used in conjunction, say with stationary laser. It's also used a lot so when we work with the aircraft. So the aircraft will fly over a speed zone, and we'll be outside of our vehicles, and then the aircraft will radio to us that I've checked this vehicle at this speed. He's number 1 to you. He's number 2 to you. He's number here. The next vehicle coming to you will be him, and if it's possible to initiate the traffic stop that way, then you flag over that vehicle that the aircraft is called to you. But also if so you're working a laser, speed check and flagging is an option. Yes.
I mean, are there areas where radar doesn't work?
Yes.
What?
The traffic volume is too heavy. The radar works upon the vehicle that returns the greatest energy to you. So even if you have a car that's going 90 miles an hour and you have a semi-truck that's going 60 miles an hour, the radar might not return that car at 90 miles an hour because the semi-truck is returning far greater energy to you. And plus, the radar, for you to to be positive that you're checking the vehicle that you're checking, there's a lot of different things that you have to go through. You have to listen to the radar output. You have to not to get too much into it. There's a lot of things that you have to keep straight there with a radar check. And in an area like a 90, so it's 4 lanes of traffic. It'd be impossible for that time for you to do a radar check. So maybe not impossible, but would be extremely difficult for you to differentiate between vehicles that you're getting a radar check on. The laser is far more, so pardon my euphemism, but cop-proof, because you point it at the vehicle that you want to check and you pull the trigger, so you can use it in say higher traffic locations.
So in a heavily trafficked area like I-90 westbound, is this a tool that multiple state patrol officers use to pull over vehicles, flagging and a laser?
Yes.
So in years, how long have you been a crash reconstructionist at this post again?
I was a crash reconstructionist for approximately 9 years total, but I was a reconstructionist for the Cleveland District for 6 years.
Any other fatal flagging crashes where troopers are killed in all that time?
No, ma'am.
You've watched this video, I'm assuming many, many times?
Yes, ma'am.
Any other vehicles head in Ken Velez's direction on that video? As if they're going to crash into him?
No, ma'am.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
So I understand what you're saying about the laser being easier to use in high volume situations than the regular radar, right?
Yes, sir.
Is it possible, though, that you could still use the laser to clock somebody, but then have another trooper pull them over in a patrol car as opposed to pointing at them?
Yes, sir, it is possible.
That's policy. That happened that morning with Trooper Velez, right?
He was working with another unit, yes, sir.
A tag team.
Yes.
So it's not necessary in order to police these type of areas that a trooper put himself in the kind of danger of pointing at traffic. That's not necessary, is it?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, there were no other troopers that were in the area. Say for them to work in tandem, say one another there. They just happened to be in the area for that time, time there. So like we said before, we have a dangerous job, and we have to work in dangerous areas, that we're out there for a reason.
I get that. And I'm not at all saying it's not a dangerous job. Police work is probably the most dangerous job. But there's lots of dangerous jobs out there, and people still take precautions. You take precautions in your job, don't you?
Yes, sir.
I mean, there's a risk that you're going to get shot at, right?
Yes, sir.
There's a Ohio highway patrolman, you wear a bulletproof vest to protect yourself, right?
So bullet resistant, but yes, I do, yes.
There's a risk that you're going to go unseen in traffic, and you now wear an orange vest, now, to protect yourself, right?
Yes, sir.
That's common sense, even if it wasn't.
Objection.
No further questions.
Thank you, you disregard the last comment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Keep going. Excuse me. Silence, so we have to confirm. Subject to the penalties approved. testimony about to give you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You see?
Thank you.
Good morning, Lieutenant. Can you please state your full name and spell it for the record?
My name is Christopher J. Kin, Chris Topher. J as in John, Kin, Kinn.
And sir, are you employed?
I am.
By whom?
The Ohio State Highway Patrol.
And sir, what position do you hold there?
I'm the Crash Reconstruction Commander, is my title, and my rank is Lieutenant.
And what are your responsibilities associated with the Crash Reconstruction Commander?
I have oversight of all the crash reconstruction officers for the Ohio State Highway Patrol, and I also have oversight of the training that's specific to crash investigation that we provide to our people and other agencies.
And how long have you been in that position?
I've been in that position since April of 2013.
And how long have you been with the Highway Patrol?
I've been employed with them since September of 2000.
What was your position on September 15th of 2016?
The same as it is now, the Crash Reconstruction Commander.
And what was your assignment for that day?
I was actually in training in Lima, Ohio.
Did you have an occasion to respond to the scene on 90 West?
I did.
In addition to this incident?
I did.
How did you become aware of that assignment?
I was contacted by then Sergeant Thorne. He's now a lieutenant. He contacted me and I responded to the scene.
And what did you do once you arrived on scene?
Once I got there, I coordinated with both then Sergeant Thorne and Trooper Todd Jester about the information that they had collected thus far. And then I also coordinated with the on-scene commander and the Office of Investigative Services commander as kind of a liaison for our investigation.
Now, why are you communicating with all these other individuals while you're on scene?
There was a lot of evidence at the scene of the crash that was being collected, and as the reconstruction commander, it was my job to make sure we had collected everything we needed to complete a thorough investigation.
And did you ensure that that process happened?
I did.
What else were your responsibilities or duties on scene that day?
I think that was it, just coordinating with the supervisors of the other sections and the on-scene commander, and then with my people to making sure we had gathered everything we needed to be able to process and properly determine what happened in the crash.
How long did you remain on scene?
A few hours.
And what was the next part of your involvement in this investigation?
I had been in communication with both Sergeant Thorne and Trooper Jester about the proceedings. They were keeping me updated as far as what was going on with the investigation in the days to follow. The next time I had direct involvement would have been September 30th, 2016.
And what happened on September 30th, 2016?
I met with Trooper Jester at the Cleveland District Headquarters, which is our facility in Brook Park. We met there to do some further investigation for the crash.
And what investigation were you doing at that point in time?
We did a few things. Number one, we imaged the event data recorder from the Hyundai Veloster that was involved in the crash. We also did a kind of layman's vehicle inspection on the Hyundai at the time. I think that was the extent of our investigation that day.
What do you mean by layman's vehicle inspection?
So I'm not an auto mechanic, but I deal with a lot of vehicles involved in crashes. So I have some experience in that field, and I've changed oil, changed the brakes, done numerous things on my own vehicles. So we didn't do like a full mechanical inspection, but we just did kind of a visual inspection, and it was some of the inspection parts were a little bit more than just visual, just to check and make sure, take out the crash damage, the vehicle was in a working order at the time of our inspection.
And what sort of things did you check?
We checked, the steering to make sure that both
tires were responsive to turning the steering wheel left and right. We checked the brakes. It wasn't we didn't take any measurements of the brakes. I actually got inside the car, and the Brook Park facility is a pretty big facility where we have a big garage bay in there, and I accelerated the vehicle to probably 5 to 10 miles an hour and hit the brakes real hard to just see if the brakes were working on the vehicle at that time of our inspection.
And were you able to determine if the steering was working on the vehicle?
It did. It responded as I would consider normal. That's based on vehicles I've driven over the course of my life.
And were you able to determine if the brakes on the vehicle were working?
Yes, they were responsive, and it brought the vehicle to a stop. Again, what I would categorize as what I would expect from a hard brake application.
What, if anything else, did you do on September 30th, 2016?
We imaged the event data recorder from inside the vehicle as well.
Did you have any other involvement in any other steps in this investigation?
I did. As a reconstruction commander, I was involved in just the general oversight and the ensuring that the reconstruction report was being completed, and it was a thorough, objective investigation.
And did you complete that task, sir?
I did.
One moment, please, Your Honor.
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Lieutenant, where is the event data recorder and how do you go about imaging it?
So the event data recorder, I would probably explain it so everybody can understand it as a black box inside a vehicle. So this technology's been around for quite some time. That can store pre-crash information from certain vehicles. This particular module had already been retrieved from the vehicle on a previous date, and all we did was hooked it up to see if there was any data on it on September 30th.
Mr. Ted?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
The black box, would you be the guy we talk up to about whether or not the black box had any information in it that might be important to the jury?
I'm the one that imaged it, yes, sir.
Okay. What did you find when you looked into my client's black box about his speed and braking and all that other good stuff?
There was no pre-crash information stored on this event data recorder or black box.
Okay. Do you know why that is?
So Hyundai has a threshold that they set on their vehicles in order to activate this box. The threshold for this one was not met. During the crash, the airbags did not come out, so it didn't trigger that black box to record an event out of this crash.
Now, what about the Honda that stopped next to the patrol car, the blue Honda? Did that have a black box in it?
I don't know. I don't know what year the vehicle was. If it was after 2013, it would have had a module in it that we could image. So to be kind of technical about your question, some of these vehicles have black boxes in them, but we can't get the data out of them. Only the vehicle manufacturer could. They don't share that technology. 2013 and newer vehicles, pretty much all the vehicles you can get that out of it.
These black box only record when there's a wreck?
Generally, they have to hit something. So if you're just driving down the road and you just slam on the brakes real hard, that's not hard enough to trigger an event, because you wouldn't want your airbags coming out if you just hit the brakes. So it has to be from an impact of some sort.
You answered my question. That's very helpful. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Lieutenant, you said that the vehicle has to hit something in order for the black box to trigger, so I'm a bit confused. There was a crash related to this incident, correct?
Correct.
Can you explain how with that significant crash the black box did trigger?
So there's a minimum threshold that you have to meet to record an event. So the way these modules work, and I'm kind of going off my experience with these modules, you wouldn't want that to come off if it's a minor fender bender. These black boxes are connected to the safety devices inside your vehicles, whether it's the pyrotechnics that fire your seatbelt extender or your seatbelt retractor that holds you in place, or it controls one of the multitude of airbags inside the vehicles today. So it senses what happened, and they set a minimum threshold on this stuff. So it's not going to come out for just a minor crash. It's going to come out when that threshold is met, and it's a severe crash. But every car is a little bit different as far as, or each vehicle manufacturer is a little bit different as far as what they would set that threshold at. So it's not uncommon that a vehicle could hit something and the airbag doesn't necessarily come out.
So is the crash, the black box only going to be triggered if the airbags or the seatbelt extender activates?
That's one way it will be triggered. It could also be from a non-deployment event. A non-deployment event means none of the things were activated, but it did reach a certain threshold, and it said the black box kind of wakes up and says, uh-oh, something happened. Oh, it wasn't that bad. Okay, I don't need to fire anything off for the safety of the people inside of it.
In addition, does it also matter where on the vehicle an impact is made in triggering that black box?
Definitely.
Can you explain that to us, please?
So when you think about the front or the side of a vehicle, there's different stiffness values. You know, the front bumper is a pretty stiff part of the car because there's a steel bumper there. It's connected to the chassis. That's a stiff part of the vehicle. If there's a solid object that's struck with that front bumper, it's going to have a dramatically different effect than something that, say, hits the windshield or hits higher on the vehicle, because that's not as stiff a value. So the difference is the lower kind of the chassis area, those impacts is going to kind of translate, that force is going to translate through that vehicle. When you look at something like the windshield being hit, that kind of absorbs the impact. That windshield, that roof line, those can absorb the impact, so that sudden jerk, it's dispersed over a longer period of time, which minimizes the kind of how bad that impact was.
Thank you. One moment. So in relation to this crash, is the location where Trooper Velez's body hit the vehicle, did that impact whether or not the black box activated?
Yes.
Can you please explain that?
Well, the manner in which he was struck by the vehicle, the only thing that hit that bottom, that chassis portion, would have been his legs. His upper body hit higher on the vehicle, and that windshield kind of absorbed that impact. So the part that windshield just kind of absorbed that impact a little bit different, so it dispersed how severe it was over a little bit longer period of time, and that's why the module would not have recorded an event in this particular case.
Thank you. Nothing further.
No, sir, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a break. Mary Pat is across the hall. One of the advantages of having my good friend Judge McDonald here is that she's handling a criminal matter for me. Mary Pat's back. Okay. But that's where she was. She was across the hall. Judge McDonald's my daughter's godmother, so since we're busy, she's helping me out. Anyway, keep in mind while you're on your break, don't discuss this case. Don't let anyone discuss the case with you. Don't form or express an opinion. No media accounts, no investigation. We'll see you back at around 11:20, 11:25.
All rise.
Deputize Ms. Seals.
Pretty good rap.
Our table's not looking as fresh as it did day one. The sign.
No, that's new today.
Here.
Neat.
Ready then, Judge?
Yes. Cindy, you said 1:30 for your person?
It should be, yeah, 1:30 would be great.
What time do you
What
want?
time's he lands?
11.
Oh,
What time would you want me to finish the direct?
10 till.
A little bit impossible.
I don't know, how long do you think it'll be?
I just explained the conversation we've had. I'm going to try to be as efficient as possible. 20, 30 minutes is like a guess. It could be shorter.
So if you don't, so you probably would finish his direct, and I don't know if you intend to cross, then you may have to do it after your expert.
Okay.
Can I bring the jury in?
Yes.
All rise. Court is in session. Please be seated.
On behalf of the state?
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Doug Elliott.
Sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm, subject to the penalties of perjury, that the testimony you're about to give here will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please be seated.
Good morning, sir. Would you state and spell your name, please?
Good morning. My name is Doug Elliott, E-L-L-I-O-T-T.
Where are you employed?
I'm employed with the Ohio State Highway Patrol.
What is your rank?
I am a sergeant.
Where are you assigned?
I am assigned to our investigation section in Columbus, Ohio, located at our general headquarters.
I'm going to ask you to stay on the front of the mic because your voice isn't carrying right now if you're not on the
Sure.
Thank you. What are your duties in Columbus?
I am a assistant post commander for our investigative section. My duties, I have supervisory oversight of highway patrol personnel, as well as I have some case management oversight of the things that they do, and I also initiate criminal and non-criminal cases.
How long with the patrol?
I've been with the highway patrol since 1999.
Could give us a brief summary of your prior career experience.
I was first assigned right out of our training academy in 1999 to the Swanton Post, which covers the western third of the Ohio Turnpike. From there, I went to Toledo. I was assigned to the Toledo Post. From there, I served at a temporary assignment at our Findlay District headquarters as a temporary investigator. And then from there, I went back to the Toledo Post for a short time, and then I was assigned as a trooper to our general headquarters investigative section, where I am today, and I was promoted about 3 years ago.
What is the critical incident response team?
The Highway Patrol has a critical incident response team. The team is combined, or it's managed out of Columbus. It's managed out of our general headquarters, out of our investigation section. And it's comprised of a commander, which can be a captain, a staff lieutenant, or a lieutenant. And then it's comprised of some other personnel, to include myself at the rank of sergeant. And the critical incident response team is responsible for responding to defined officer-involved incidents that are serious in nature by policy.
Can you give us a brief description of what qualifies for critical incident response?
We have about 7, different things that we respond to, or the critical incident team responds to, and one of those is the on-duty death of an officer.
During the course of a year, how many trooper fatalities on average?
Not very many. 1.
Are there years without any?
There are years without any, yes.
So given the nature of the law enforcement agency being statewide, and you have posts throughout the state, but is there this centralized command function that can deliver resources to individual post commanders that they would ordinarily have?
Yes, there is.
What does it bring to the table, so to speak?
It brings to the table something that's the purpose. I should back up. The CERT team, its purpose is to kind of create a professional, unbiased, and consistent reporting system, investigation. So it's not uncommon that a post commander or a district commander might request us, depending on the situation.
Okay. Being based in Columbus, and you have a distant incident to respond to, are aircraft available to you?
Generally speaking, yes, depending on other things that are in place at the time.
But in the case of an officer fatality, is time of the essence to get to the scene before it's released. A major interstate can't be stopped for 24 hours, can it?
No, it cannot.
Okay. So is time a factor in how the patrol can respond to an interstate fatality?
Yes.
So you said that uniformity of reporting and assessing the incident. Why is that important to the patrol?
It's important that we handle our things in we try to be consistent. We don't want vast differences in the way we report these. We want to be consistent, and so what one person might do in another district may be acceptable, but we want to maintain that consistency of our critical incidents and the way we report them the same.
Is there any requirement that the patrol not be the investigating entity for its own employees on the job fatality?
No, I think it's a situation where, should we arrive on scene with another law enforcement agency that shares the jurisdiction with us, those issues are usually worked out at a rank much higher than me, but it's a cooperative effort.
Okay. You've heard the topic raised by Mr. Sin of the label I'm going to put on it to cover all these questions he may have asked in this regard, investigative bias, that you're investigating one of your own, so to speak, and his conduct or her conduct prior to their death. Can you speak on how you view that subject in answer to the claims or the questions raised by Mr. Sin about investigative bias?
When we investigate things, we are searching for the facts. We're not searching for opinions. We're not searching for anything else other than the facts. And we interview people. We submit reports. We submit lab reports. We take photographs. We are looking for the facts. We're not looking at anything beyond that.
In a hypothetical situation, if your employee did something that led to or caused their own death directly without the fault of the driver, would you still charge the driver just to cover the misconduct, if you will, of the employee?
No.
Why not?
It's been my experience that it's not professional. It's not truthful.
So let's turn to September 15, 2016. Where were you working that day?
I was working that day. I was working in our office in Columbus.
And were you notified of this event?
Yes, I was. My immediate supervisor, my lieutenant for the section, notified me of what had occurred and that a CERT team response was needed to the Cleveland area.
Do you recall from your own memory approximately what time you were notified?
That was about 1:30 p.m.
Now, prior to taking the stand here today, have you reviewed a report that you created covering the investigation that you participated in?
Yes, I have.
let's work from memory for the time being, all right? Take us through what your initial decisions were before leaving Columbus.
As soon as I was notified, of course, with Columbus and Cleveland are quite a big distance away driving, not taking into account traffic conditions or whatever, things may have come along our way. So we had to make some decisions, some game time decisions of if I was going to drive or if they were going to see if there was an aircraft, Highway Patrol owned aircraft was available to fly me to Cleveland. And that was what was the decision that was made, that I was going to go to our hangar, which is located at the Ohio State University Airport, and one of our pilots was going to fly me to Cleveland.
Was that your personal decision or someone above you in rank?
That was somebody above me in rank.
Okay. So you're told, get on the plane, you're going to Cleveland.
Yes, sir.
Okay, then what?
Made contact with our aviation section. They had already been aware of it. There was a few other things that they were dealing with, but arranged to make that 20-minute drive to where the airport's located at. Met with the pilot. The pilot proceeded to go through their normal pre-flight inspections and so forth, and we were wheels up, so to speak, from Columbus.
What time did you arrive at Burke Airport here in Cleveland?
It was roughly 3:30, 3:40 p.m.
Okay. If you know, what time do you recall arriving on scene?
I was picked up by one of our Brook Park OSP troopers. In that day, there were some traffic issues, so it took us approximately a half an hour probably to negotiate that traffic to get to the scene.
Okay. You know who Lieutenant Ryan Chapman is?
Yes, I do.
And who is he?
He is one of our staff officers, and on this day, he was our critical incident team commander.
Okay. Upon arriving on scene, did you meet and consult with him as to what had been viewed or learned to that point?
Yes, I did.
And what issues did you identify? Now, are you in the position then of taking over control of this scene, or are you working for Chapman, so to speak? Which is it?
Staff Lieutenant Chapman is the commander of that scene, so he's making decisions and he's directed me to do different things.
All right, so he's giving you directives and you're bringing resources to his investigation?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so what tasks were immediately identified that you could aid in?
At the scene, I took possession of a iPhone, and at the scene, I also took possession of the in-car camera video that was saved to Trooper Velez's inside the car, the hard drive.
Okay. And what did you do with those items once you possessed them?
They were retained until we made our trip back to Columbus.
Okay. For the moment, I'm going to press pause, if you will, here. Ultimately, was the iPhone password protected?
Yes, it was.
Was it encrypted?
Yes, it was.
Were you able to open it and look into it?
No.
And did you attempt to obtain a search warrant for that purpose?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did you ever attend any events that took place at Fairview Hospital?
Yes. After I had left the scene, I went to the hospital. Wasn't there very long, and which I took possession of some urine evidence and some blood evidence.
And what did you do with those items once you had them?
Those were transported back to Columbus, where I met with one of our lieutenants, who is a supervisor at our crime lab.
How were they transported?
They were transported by vehicle.
Same day?
Same day.
Okay. Now, if this was a different circumstance, would those be popped in a FedEx box and mailed?
Those are usually mailed, yes, unless we have resources in place that we can relay those down, but typically they're mailed.
Would it make sense to do that if you're directly returning from Cleveland back to Columbus where the lab is?
No, not to put them in the mail, no, wouldn't make sense.
Did you contact or consult with the medical examiner's office regarding Trooper Ken Velez?
Yes, I did.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I made some contact with the medical examiner's office to find out when their examinations would be done, and they gave me some feedback, and then ultimately I attended that examination.
You attended the autopsy?
Yes, I did.
Did you participate in issuance of any preservation requests to any telecommunications company concerning Mr. Gaspar?
Yes, I did. I had sent, I don't remember the exact date, but I did send, I think it was the day following the crash, I sent a preservation letter. And what that preservation letter is, it just asks the cell phone provider to retain those records for a period of time until we're able to proceed with other court orders as needed to obtain records.
Okay, I'm going to throw an acronym at you. OARRS, ORS. What is it?
That is a database that I believe is maintained by or regulated by the Ohio Pharmacy Board.
Okay, what does it do?
That shows our prescription histories that doctors issue out to us.
Okay, are you able to make law enforcement queries for prescriptions of individuals?
Yes, through a designated person for our agency.
Okay, was that query done for Mr. Gaspar?
Yes, it was.
Do you know what the results were?
Yes, there was some prescription history in there, I believe, if I recall correctly.
Now, this stretch of I-90, an interstate with ODOT jurisdiction over primarily this interstate, correct? Does ODOT have a system of cameras on their light poles throughout the state?
Yes, they do. They have a system of cameras, and those cameras are monitored from their traffic center in Columbus, which their office is actually located right next to mine.
Does every light pole have a camera?
No.
Tell us how that works.
It's my understanding, and I don't know, I'm just a layperson's understanding of this, but throughout different metropolitan areas around the state, the Ohio Department of Transportation has installed live camera feeds to monitor traffic.
Did there come a point in time in this investigation when ODOT was queried as to whether or not a camera had captured this event?
Yes.
What did you learn?
Couple things. Learned that the traffic video is only retained for 72 hours, and they do that because of the vast storage space that's needed to collect all the camera video throughout the state is limited. So they set a 72-hour limit on that, and then it purges.
Was there also a situation where the camera closest to this event was pointing in the opposite direction and could not be captured?
That is my understanding, yes.
In terms of data capture, if you will, was anything done to attempt to query Ken Velez's laser device that he was using that day?
Yes. The laser device is, of course, manufactured by a company, and I made some contact with the company to see if there was any way that laser retains any kind of data from its use, much like your computer. If you save information to your computer, you can go back and look at the data. And from my conversations with the manufacturer, the data is not retained. So once the speed is displayed on the laser, there's only a short time until that laser goes into a sleep mode, so to speak, or shutdown mode, and it erases off the display.
Did there come a point in time when Sergeant Gable submitted an email to you detailing his observations for the roadside sobriety test that he's testified to in court?
Yes, there was a time, yes.
Okay. Then did that get incorporated in your report?
Yes, it did.
Why?
He sent me the information, and typically when people send me that information, I usually include it in the report. In my day-to-day activity of what goes on.
Now, I'm going to press pause again in the timeline narrative. So we know this is a fatal that day. We
know from earlier testimony that the Ohio State Highway Patrol Laboratory returned positive blood results within 2, maybe 3 days. I think the last report was the 19th, if I recall from the testimony. Given the nature of this type of case, why not march into Lakewood Muni Court with OVI tickets and pursue a municipal charge? Or Cleveland Municipal Court, whatever the jurisdiction is appropriate.
Because of the complexity of this case, and I'm vaguely aware of some legalities that the courts must deal with, and because of the complexity of the case, we basically compile all the information. We consult with the prosecuting attorney's office of what we have, and we make decisions whether or not to take this case and present it to a grand jury.
Okay. And in consultation with local prosecutorial authorities, specifically our office, the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office, was a determination made for a grand jury presentment?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And in that instance, would you then still pursue a municipal court charging or presentment there?
It's been my experience, no.
Were there certain elements of this case that would take longer than 90 days to complete?
Yes.
Okay. And would that be compatible with the municipal court timeline for a municipal offense?
I don't know that I can answer that. I don't know what those timelines are.
Did there come a point in time when ODOT did send you some video and you couldn't access it or something like that?
Yeah, yes, they did.
Tell us about that.
At some point in time, I received an email from Staff Lieutenant Chapman that had an attachment from our ODOT personnel, and for whatever reason, I could not open the attachment. I think the attachment was corrupted.
Okay. Was that later cleared up or viewed?
No.
Do you know whether or not it contained a depiction of the event?
It did not. As we previously mentioned, the cameras weren't pointing the right way.
Okay. Did you have the opportunity to speak with Lieutenant Huggins and then learn of the interview of Dr. Keegan Connery?
Yes.
And did you incorporate a summary or a restatement of that interview in your report?
Yes, I did.
Why?
It's normal for us to go out and do some follow-up interviews with people. And Lieutenant Huggins and I, who were working together, decided that we would attempt to do some follow-up interviews of some witnesses.
Did you have any interaction with the plainclothes detectives in terms of their investigative activities at CAAA, Community Action Against Addiction, or in terms of records or search warrants for that clinic?
The troopers that were working on that part of the investigation briefly explained to me what they had found.
Okay. Did you request any professional records, yes or no, on Dr. DeFranco?
Not that I'm aware of, not on my behalf, no.
Okay. Do you know of someone else in the course of this
Objection,
investigation?
relevance.
Sustained.
During the days, weeks, months that followed, did you have periodic investigative group meetings, follow-ups, and then also on occasion travel to Cleveland to meet with members of the prosecution to discuss the case?
Yes, I did.
Any physical evidence that you handled, was it appropriately logged and handled in the correct fashion for physical evidence
Ohio State Highway Patrol policy?
Yes, it was.
So you flew to Cleveland. Did you fly back to Columbus?
No, I did not. I actually rode with Staff Lieutenant Chapman on the way back to Columbus.
And the physical samples that had been obtained at Fairview, they were in that vehicle with you?
Yes.
What was done with them upon your return to Columbus?
They were provided to Lieutenant Rudy Zupants, who is a supervisor at our crime lab.
Did you have any interaction with Mr. Gaspar on scene that day?
No, I did not.
Did you observe his conduct at any point that day?
No, I did not.
Thank you.
No questions, Your Honor.
So you can start talking, make it. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a lunch break. If you're back downstairs at 1:20, we're going to be having an additional witness at 1:30. Maybe someone taken slightly out of order, but I'll have more information for you at that time. Won't consider you at all for your lunch. Keep in mind, don't discuss this case. I'm only one to discuss the case with you. Don't form or express an opinion. No investigation, no media. But do enjoy a nice day before the rain comes. Betsy Clayton assured us it's coming, so.
Next one.
I got it.
What's that, Quill? You want it the other way?
Thank you.
Yes. Hold it for us. You'll be able to sneak into your chair, right?
Shut this off, what time you, I turn it back on, it'll come back on?
I would leave it on and just take the paper off.
Okay. No problem.
Ready, Hunter?
I will be able to.
Just take it on there for a second.
Yes.
Okay. You can just take the paper off.
Okay.
And then it'll be ready for you. What do you need? I'm just trying to put our, so it's not.
Good, Judge?
Yes.
Can everyone line up, please?
Did you get those jury instructions, any copies of them we can look at?
Yeah, there are copies of where I was looking. It's just a draft. I haven't.
I just want to look at a definition that you have.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Again, I did not let you.
I know.
All rise for the jury. Court is in session. Please be seated.
Mr. Kramer, your job was to make sure they all behaved on the elevators.
Everyone did.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. When we came up, there were a number of people in between our chambers. We have prosecutors that are assigned to our floor. There are 5 or 6, depending on their staffing at the time. So one of our prosecutors this is his last day with us, and then 2, including Ms. Hall, will be moving on to a different floor starting in a week or so. So they rotate about once a year, and our public defenders rotate about once a year too. So we get to see and experience more talented attorneys, and we're happy with that, but we will miss those that have been with us in the past. And, I'm sure that you have people that you like to work with too, and then sometimes they move on. So that was our situation. That was why we're having a little party.
Judge, at this time, the state's going to allow the defense to call a witness out of order because of the witness's professional schedule, and it's done with our consent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Might the court explain that the state's case is still open, we have not represented, et cetera?
You all understood that? The state still has a few witnesses, I believe, but because of timing and schedules and the preference to have the witness here in person, defense has asked, and the court permitted this witness to come in to be before you today and to be examined. Okay?
Ready for the judge to be sworn, please. Then we'll take it out to see what happens.
Sir, if you can raise your right hand, please. Do solemnly swear or affirm, subject to the penalties of perjury, that the testimony I'm about to give here will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, Your Honor.
Would you like some water?
That would be good, thank you.
Okay. Which microphone is this, sir?
You want? No. It moves up and down.
All right, thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you.
Will you please state your name for the jury?
My name is Anthony Palacios.
And Mr. Flashes, what is your occupation, sir?
I am a law enforcement consultant for attorneys, both prosecutors and defense attorneys, and I specialize in the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's impaired driving training curriculum, alcohol and drugs.
Okay. So you provided me with a CV or a resume. Would you please summarize your professional experience for me?
I can. I've been a private consultant for attorneys since January of 2008. Since that time, I've consulted in over 1,500 cases for attorneys across the country. Prior to that, I had approximately 14 years of law enforcement experience. In those 14 years, about 10 of it focused in traffic enforcement and under the influence enforcement. My last 4 years, I was a full-time staff instructor at the police academy, and I was assigned to the traffic section where all we did was teach impaired driving training to law enforcement officers.
Have you ever testified as an expert witness in the past?
I have.
Where?
I've testified as an expert in municipal court, state court, superior court, district court, circuit court, court of common pleas, and general sessions court.
In what fields have you testified as an expert witness?
Primarily in the NHTSA impaired driving training curriculum, whether it's alcohol or drug related.
Okay. And in what states have you testified as an expert?
I've testified as an expert in over 20 different states. Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, starting to go west, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, California, Oregon, Washington, here in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C. I don't think I hit them all, but maybe I'm close.
Has any court ever denied you your qualification as an expert?
No, they haven't.
Are your services available to the prosecution?
Absolutely. My services are available for both the defense and prosecution, whether it's a case file review and analysis or the training that I provide for attorneys.
Are you paid for your time in this case?
Yes, I am.
Who's paying you?
Your firm paid me.
How much were you paid?
$2,000 for case review analysis, trial prep, and my time today.
Does the compensation that my firm paid you affect your testimony?
Absolutely not.
Are you paid more if I get a not guilty verdict?
Absolutely not.
Are you paid less if there's a guilty verdict?
Absolutely not.
Have there been times when your testimony was not requested after an initial review and analysis of a case?
Absolutely. There's been many times I've reviewed a case for an attorney and given the attorney my opinion, and they've decided not to pursue my services and asked me to come testify in court.
Are you familiar with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's A-Ride training curriculum and their DRE training curriculum?
Very familiar.
Okay. How are you aware of them?
I became aware of those training curriculums, the Drug Recognition Expert Program, back in 2001 when I went through as a practitioner, as well as A-Ride. When it came out, I instantly started teaching that as well, and went through DRE instructor course in 2003.
Okay. Did you ever, you have attended the DRE instructor training?
That is correct.
Have you actually ever trained police officers on how to, in this NHTSA, national, as we call it, right, NHTSA?
Correct.
Have you ever trained police officers in DUI alcohol and DUI drug training courses as it relates to NHTSA?
Yes, when I left the police academy as a staff instructor, I trained approximately 3,000 law enforcement officers, a couple hundred prosecutors, all in the NHTSA impaired driving training curriculum.
Okay. Do you still teach the NHTSA A-Ride course and the DRE course as an expert?
I'm sorry, Counsel, just a little slower.
I'm sorry. Do you still teach the NHTSA A-Ride course and the DRE course as an expert?
I do. I teach the NHTSA A-Ride course exactly how it is in the training curriculum. As far as the drug recognition expert course, I just offer an overview. It's a 3-day overview, not the actual true certification.
Have you ever been requested to speak at a national or state conference in your area of expertise?
I have. I'm speaking at over 30 national, state, and local impaired driving conferences for defense attorneys, prosecutors, and judges.
Okay. Your Honor, based on this witness's work experience, training, and certification, I move the court to accept this witness as an expert in the area of National Highway Traffic Safety Administration Advanced Roadside Impaired Driving Enforcement Training, which is A-Ride, and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration Drug Recognition Expert Training Course, and qualified to render his opinion within his field of expertise.
Objection, Your Honor.
This witness will be permitted to testify as an expert on those fields.
Thank you. Sir, we went through a lot of stuff there, and some of it's required, but I'm going to ask you some other questions, okay?
Okay.
You were in law enforcement.
Yes, I was.
How did you start off in law enforcement? Where did you start off?
In Georgia.
And you were a police officer?
Correct.
And your duties as a police officer kind of focused a lot on driving at some point, or traffic enforcement?
Yes, initially I was just a regular, I don't want to use regular, but I was a patrol officer, answering calls and services. And then eventually I started specializing in traffic enforcement and DUI enforcement.
Have you actually been out on the roads and made DUI arrests?
Yes, prior to going to the police academy as a full-time instructor, I was assigned to a DUI task force, where that was my sole function, to do DUI enforcement.
We talked a lot about all these labels and initials. Have you ever gone out and done field sobriety tests on folks that you pulled over?
Thousands of times.
And you've made arrests on those folks, and you've taken them to court and that type of thing?
I have.
At some point, you were elevated out of the police department and put into your state academy?
Correct.
And were you still a police officer when you were in your academy?
Yes, I was considered a state officer, still had arrest powers, but our primary function was teaching.
Now, your business is in Atlanta, Georgia, right?
Alpharetta, Georgia, which is a northern suburb of Atlanta.
You got off the plane about 2 hours ago.
2.5, that is correct.
And even though you're in Alpharetta, you consult all over the country.
Yes, because this being a national training curriculum.
What does that mean?
The impaired driving training curriculum through NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, is a national training curriculum, which means every state that has accepted that specific training program teaches it the same way to every officer. So every officer that's gone through this training does it the same way across the country. Whether they're officers out of Atlanta, New York City, or here in Ohio, if they've gone through this A-RIDE training, it's the same exact training. If they've gone through drug recognition expert training, it's the same exact training.
How long were you in teach at the police academy?
A little over 4 years.
At some point, you left the police academy and started your business?
Correct.
When did that occur?
My last day at the police academy was December 31st, 2007, and officially started this business January 1st, the next day.
And you resigned from the police academy? You weren't fired or anything like that?
Correct, I wasn't fired. I resigned.
Why did you leave police work?
To get closer to my daughters. They were north of Atlanta, and the police academy is in middle Georgia, and it was about a 3-hour drive to go visit them.
Okay. Sir, the NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, what are they?
NHTSA is part of the federal government. They fall under the Department of Transportation.
Why are they involved in all this test and stuff?
NHTSA's primary function is highway safety, whether it's through funding of roads, also providing training for law enforcement officers and prosecutors and judges.
So the classes you teach to attorneys, are they the same classes that a law enforcement officer would get in an academy somewhere?
They're the same exact courses other than the drug recognition expert course. Once I left law enforcement, I was only offering an overview of that course.
That 2-week course where they actually go into homeless shelters and stuff and work with folks and like test them out and stuff, that's the DRE?
Correct. The training classroom's 2 weeks, but it takes a lot longer than that.
Okay. You yourself have taught that DRE class to law enforcement officers?
Yes, many times.
The 2-week class?
Correct.
Okay. So you're familiar with the whole DRE process?
Very familiar.
And all the tests?
Correct.
Do these tests change from state to state?
No.
Do they change from police department to police department?
No.
So an officer in Ohio who's NHTSA trained should be trained the same identical way as an officer in Hawaii?
Absolutely.
How many of those drug evaluations do you think you did?
I've been involved in, I would say, over 100 DRE evals.
Okay. Now, sir, are you still certified DRE?
No, when I left law enforcement, an officer has to recertify every 2 years. The drug recognition expert training is a true certification. So every 2 years, an officer has to recertify. Once you get out of law enforcement, you're not allowed to recertify anymore.
So because you're no longer a police officer, you can no longer go out there and actual do DRE evaluations on people charged with crimes.
Right, that's what it means. Me not being certified means I can't go out and do a DRE eval on someone and use it to prosecute them.
But you still do DRE evaluations routinely in the line of your business for training purposes?
Correct.
Now, does the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration still allow you to teach their courses, even though you're no longer a police officer?
All the courses except for the drug recognition expert course. That's why I have to teach an overview.
So if I go to one of your courses as an attorney, I'm going to come out with the same certification as a law enforcement officer who went through a class at an academy, except for the DRE one.
Except for the DRE, that is correct.
Sir, we heard from an Officer Gable yesterday. He's a DRE. He kind of indicated to us that maybe things in Ohio, and the way they teach A-RIDE in Ohio, might be different than how they teach it in other places. Is that the case as far as your training experience goes?
No, the A-RIDE training curriculum is a national training curriculum. All the instructors throughout the country are given the same exact curriculum, and if they're teaching it the way they're supposed to be teaching it, it's taught the same way across the country. It's standardized.
Now, we're going to talk a little bit about Officer Gable and some of the things that he told us. Are you familiar with what a drug matrix is?
I'm very familiar.
What's a drug matrix?
A drug matrix is a chart that an officer is given when they go through the A-RIDE training course or the drug recognition expert course. And this chart lists out the 7 different drug categories that officers are trained to look for. And under each drug category, it tells the officer what to look for that would support someone's under the influence of that specific drug category. The matrix lists tests like the horizontal gaze nystagmus test, lack of convergence test, a time estimation, and then general observations. And then when an officer's doing their investigation, they would use this matrix to kind of plug in all the information and say, okay, it appears this person's under the influence of this, or they're under the influence of this, or not under the influence.
So it's kind of a uniform way that an officer can approach an individual and look at the indicators they're giving off and try and use those indicators to classify. Well, it's not really the indicators, is it? It's the results of the varying tests, the HGN, the VGN, the lack of convergence, and do like a graph. Matter of fact, I have one for you. I'm going to ask if you recognize this, sir. We used it yesterday. We tried to fix it up a little bit. So it's open up. Okay. I did it again, but sorry. Does this look familiar to you?
That is, yes, that is the top portion of the matrix for the A-RIDE training course.
Okay. Now, I have plugged in certain factors that were found in my client's field sobriety test, and I want to talk about that with you. But let's talk about this case, okay? I paid you to give me an evaluation.
Correct.
And then I asked you to come testify to your report.
Correct.
What did you review in giving me an evaluation?
I reviewed Sergeant Gable's police report or incident report, as well as the video recording of the investigation.
Did you actually watch my client take the field sobriety test?
Yes.
In addition to watching him take the test, did you have an opportunity to observe him on camera and watch his behavior?
Yes.
Were you able to listen to him and listen to the sound of his voice and such?
The majority of the time, yes.
Do you feel comfortable that you have enough information to assist me in plugging my client's information in this graph based on Sergeant Gable's findings?
Yes, based on Sergeant Gable's findings, yes.
You didn't do these tests?
Correct. I'm not the one that did the test.
So you didn't actually look in my client's eyes?
That is correct.
You've never met my client, have you?
I've never met him before.
But we're going to assume for purposes of this exercise that Sergeant Gable did do these tests the way he said he did them, and we're going to use that information. Can we do that?
Yes.
Tell us about Category 1.
Category 1 is central nervous system depressants. So all the drugs out there that slow down someone's central nervous system is put in that based on the impaired driving training curriculum.
Okay. And Sergeant Gable talked about that yesterday. I'm not going to beat that horse, but I do want to go over some things just to freshen things up. Is this a chart that is used by officers? Not my client's specific information, but this chart, is this used in teaching the A-RIDE course and in the evaluations on the field?
Yes, that is the top portion of the A-RIDE drug symptomology chart or matrix that officers are given when they go through A-RIDE.
I'm going to show you Defendant's Exhibit A. You ever see one of those?
I have.
What is that?
That is called it's a copy of a pupilometer card, the front portion and the back portion, based on the ARIDE training curriculum.
Okay. And where does that form come from?
The matrix itself comes from the ARIDE training curriculum. There's a private company out there that provides the pupilometer card.
Okay. And law enforcement can buy them and use them in the field?
Absolutely.
Do they use them in the field?
Absolutely.
Did you use one in the field?
I did.
When you teach the ARIDE course, do you provide one of those? You provide a card like that to the students?
Yes, I do.
And they take it home with them and use it in the field if that's what they're going to do?
Correct.
Now, on that card, let me tell you this. Sergeant Gable had never seen a card like that before, or indicated he hadn't. Does that make sense to you that somebody who's been a DRE and an ARIDE instructor would not have any knowledge of that kind of card in the field?
It does not make sense to me, especially because of the information that's on it. It comes from the Drug Symptomology Charter Matrix that is provided in all the ARIDE training curriculums. I know Sergeant Gable is a drug recognition expert, and even in DRE training, they provide multiple pupilometer cards as well.
Well, I don't want to misspeak on behalf of Sergeant Gable, and I think he may have been onto something here, but I want to ask you. We've got horizontal gaze nystagmus because that's important, right?
Very important.
We've got vertical gaze nystagmus, that's important.
It is.
We've got lack of convergence, that's important.
Correct.
Pupil size is important.
Correct.
Time estimation. Sergeant Gable put absolutely no weight into time estimation. He didn't even think it belonged on the chart. Is that proper, given the training that you've had?
It's not proper, and it's actually rather confusing considering Sergeant Gable administered the test for time estimation, which was the modified Romberg balance. That's what one of the primary purposes you use that test is for time estimation, and he administered the test.
Yeah, but then he indicated that he really just uses it, I believe, to check and see if someone's swaying and to look at them real well.
That's one of the indicators or observations an officer's trained to look for during the Romberg balance, but time estimation is just as important.
Why?
Certain drugs affect someone's ability to estimate time. It slows down or speeds up their internal clock, and that's one of the things officers are trained to test for during the modified Romberg balance.
Now, not every chart in the ARIDE book has the time estimation. Not every drug matrix in the ARIDE book has a time estimation.
In the ARIDE training curriculum it does. In the drug recognition expert program, that matrix does not have the time estimation column in it because it's more detailed. The drug recognition expert matrix has a lot more information provided on that matrix because a lot more is administered and performed by an officer.
Let me stop you there. Do you think that a properly done drug recognition evaluation has the ability to properly categorize what kind of drug somebody is on?
Absolutely.
Do you believe in this?
Yes, absolutely.
A 12-step process.
As long as it's done correctly, I'm a firm believer in it.
Do you believe that an officer that doesn't do the DRE, but rather uses the 3 standardized field sobriety tests and a modified Romberg and a modified Romberg and a finger and nose test, based on those tests, are you able to definitively classify someone's ingestion of a certain drug?
No.
Why?
Multiple reasons. The training curriculum tells the officers at least 3 or 4 different times I can think of that the ARIDE training is not designed, and it actually doesn't qualify an officer to be able to give an opinion of a specific drug or drug category. It's designed to establish probable cause, where the drug recognition expert evaluation is a lot more done in that. It's in a controlled environment, and that's designed to let an officer actually give an opinion on a drug category.
So if I were to tell you that Sergeant Gable did come in and did give an opinion as to whether or not my client was impaired based on the 3 standardized tests and the 2 other tests. Would you believe, would you agree that he has enough information to give that opinion?
Not to a specific drug category, no.
Okay. But you do believe that if he went further and done the DRE, he may have that ability?
Oh, absolutely. That's what that training, the drug recognition expert training is designed to do, is allow that officer to spend a lot of time with the person in a controlled environment, doing a lot more tests that were done here, so they can give that opinion.
Well, I'm done talking about Gable for a while, but let's try and find out whether or not, based on Gable's information, my client is impaired pursuant to the matrix that is on the board and is used by law enforcement. So let's first check and see if he is impaired by a CNS depressant. If I were to tell you that my client had HGN, he had VGN, he had lack of convergence, he had normal pupil size, and his time estimation was slow, what does that tell us about whether or not he was under the influence of a CNS depressant?
If your client displayed all those were present, then that would support he's under the influence of a depressant.
Okay. You know what I think we did? I think we actually have the information from the card on there. We don't have the actual information from my client. So let's change that for us.
Yeah, that is what's on there, is the actual
This
card
is the
itself.
actual card and what you got.
Correct.
All right. Sorry about that. Oops, I lost the marker here. Okay. Yeah, we had to clean up after yesterday. Do you have Sergeant Gable's information about my client's performance?
I do.
We're going to use your information because mine's not as good. What these are, were showing me what an individual who has all the clues for those specific categories would exhibit, correct?
That is correct. That is the actual top portion of the matrix that officers are trained to look at.
What was my client's HGN?
Based on the sergeant's report, HGN was not present.
All right, so we'll put that all across the board. All right. Based on HGN not being present in my client alone, are you able to eliminate any drug categories?
Absolutely.
So just by the fact that his eyes don't exhibit that nystagmus that's tested for in that battery or that HGN test, we can eliminate categories?
Absolutely.
Which ones can we eliminate?
An officer can eliminate central nervous system depressants because that drug category causes nystagmus.
Okay. Okay.
An officer can eliminate dissociative anesthetics because that drug category causes nystagmus, as well as inhalants.
Now, is there a difference between somebody taking a substance and somebody actually being impaired by that substance?
Of course.
Okay. So, is it possible that somebody could take a CNS depressant but not show the signs of impairment?
Absolutely.
I could have half a beer and I've taken a CNS depressant,
Correct.
but I wouldn't necessarily have my eyes start twitching.
Correct.
Let's talk about vertical gaze and nystagmus. How did my client do on that?
According to Sergeant Gable, he did not display vertical gaze and nystagmus.
No. I think everybody hates the red. Okay. Based on that, can we eliminate any drug categories?
The same drug categories that causes horizontal gaze and nystagmus, also vertical. So it would be central nervous system depressants, dissociative anesthetics, and inhalants.
Okay. So we got 2 on that one. 2 on that one. So he's really not under the influence of those. Lack of convergence. That's the thing where Sergeant Gable said he spun his finger and then pointed in to see if my client's eyes would cross.
Correct.
And they wouldn't, or at least one went kind of fuzzy on it.
Correct.
So, and you watched how he did these tests, right?
I did.
Is there any problem with the way he did these tests that would necessarily affect the information we're putting in these charts?
No, the HGN tests and lack of convergence tests and VGN tests were administered correctly.
Okay. So, let's talk about lack of convergence. How did my client do on that? Yes, he had it, right?
It was present, which would make it for depressants, dissociative anesthetics.
Hang on a minute. So, based on that, can we eliminate any categories?
Well, the 4 drug categories that cause lack of convergence are the 3 drug categories that cause nystagmus, depressants, inhalants, and dissociative anesthetics,
Okay.
which those are already eliminated so that officers should know it's not those 3 drug categories causing that. In
Let's
addition,
go over that again.
okay,
So, the lack of convergence is present. He's got it.
correct.
But in some cases, lack of convergence, even though it's present, would indicate some of these. The fact that there's no HGN would negate that. Is that true?
Absolutely. HGN is the most reliable test out of those 3 eye exams.
Okay. So say again about what we know from the fact that he has LSD present.
Although depressants causes lack of convergence, that drug category has already been eliminated because there's no nystagmus. Same thing with dissociative anesthetics. Although that drug category causes lack of convergence, it's already been eliminated because of no nystagmus. Same thing with inhalants. The only other drug category that causes lack of convergence is that last drug category, cannabis.
So at this point in time, he could, based on this, my client could be under the influence of cannabis.
If you're just figuring in those 3 tests alone,
Just those 3
absolutely,
tests.
absolutely.
He's got no HGN, his eyes aren't acting funny. He's got no VGN, his eyes aren't acting funny. But he does have lack of convergence. They're acting a little funny on that test.
Correct.
And that so far would indicate somebody who may be under the presence of maybe under the influence of marijuana.
Correct, because on the matrix under narcotic and hallucinogens, it would actually say none and none for that block.
My client's pupils, I know this, were constricted. Now, you watched that test, correct? The test that was done?
I saw a time where it appeared that that Sergeant Gable was estimating pupil size.
Okay. Is there any difficulty in estimating pupil size in an outdoor setting?
Absolutely.
What's the difficulty?
The natural lighting, whether it's during the daytime or at night, obviously can affect someone's pupils even when they're unimpaired. During the daytime, if it's real bright out, someone's pupils can be small, even though they're sober. At nighttime, if there's not a lot of light out, the pupils will expand, even if the person's sober.
Does the fact that the person's eyes may be constricted or dilated, does that in and of itself impair their ability to drive?
In and of itself, no.
Okay. So, my client is constricted. What do we know about constricted and how it affects what my client may have been on?
Well, out of the 4 drug categories that are left, which is the stimulants, hallucinogens, narcotics, and cannabis, narcotic analgesics are the only ones that constrict the pupils.
Okay. So, because of that, we can eliminate cannabis, we can eliminate hallucinogens, and we can eliminate stimulants. He's got constricted pupils, and those would not be present if he had those other drugs in the system.
Correct.
So now we're focused on narcotics analgesics, of which methadone is a narcotic analgesic, correct?
It is.
And so far, narcotics analgesics would seem to be a good fit for this because we have no HGN, no VGN. We do have lack of convergence. Is that correct? Lack of convergence would be present with narcotic analgesics?
No, it would not.
Oh, okay. So I forgot to ask you about that, didn't I? So narcotic analgesics doesn't have lack of convergence.
Correct, it does not.
Does that mean I can eliminate narcotic analgesics from this list?
I wouldn't eliminate it just in and of itself based on lack of convergence because it's the least reliable out of all the eye tests. I would wait till the rest of the drug symptomology chart has gone through.
Are you comfortable with me eliminating the other categories that I've eliminated?
Yes.
But you're not ready yet to make a call on narcotic analgesic because the lack of convergence is not as reliable a test.
Correct.
Let's talk about the modified Romberg balance test.
Okay.
What is that test?
It is a test that an officer can use out in the field. An officer first learns about the modified Romberg balance when they go through the ARIDE training course. As I mentioned earlier, it's a time estimation test. What an officer will do is tell someone to stand with their feet together, their hands down by their side. The officer will tell them, I want you to watch and listen to me when I give you a set of instructions. The officer would then tell the person, when I tell you to, I want you to tilt your head back slightly, close your eyes, and estimate the passing of 30 seconds. When you think 30 seconds is up, tilt your head forward, open up your eyes, and tell me stop, so I know you're at 30 seconds. The officer would ask the driver if they understand. If they say yes, the officer would tell them to go ahead and tilt their head back slightly, close their eyes. The officer would find a good starting point, either on their watch or on their phone, and then they'll tell the person to begin, and then the officer would start their timer. During that time, the person's obviously estimating the passage of 30 seconds in their head. As the person's estimating it, that gives an officer an opportunity to look at what's called clinical indicators, things that people can't control, eyelid tremors, body tremors, sway, things like that. And then also during that time, the officer's just waiting for the person to tilt their head forward, open up their eyes, and say stop. And once they say stop, the officer will say, okay, how much time was that? Obviously, the person should say 30 seconds, because that's what they're instructed to do. And then the officer would ask them, well, how'd you get that? And then the officer would wait for that response.
Is that a good test to use when you're trying to determine whether or not somebody may be under influence of a particular drug category?
It's a helpful test. It's not as reliable as HGN or VGN, but it is a helpful test to use out in the field because it's a time estimation test, and it also gives that officer time to observe a person's body.
And this time estimation, you find that to be relevant in making a determination as to whether somebody's under a drug category, a drug influence?
It's relevant to help make that determination, of course.
So if Sergeant Gable didn't find it to be relevant, even though he's the one that did the test, would you find that problematic with his position?
I find it quite confusing because, as I said earlier, that's the primary reason why you give someone the modified Romberg balance, to test their time estimation. But like I said, you also look for the other general indicators.
You saw on the video that Sergeant Gable gave Josh the modified Romberg, correct?
Absolutely.
And the modified Romberg, in order to do well on that test, I need to have my internal clock needs to be running correctly, right?
It does.
And if my internal clock is running slow, explain to me how that works. How would I estimate time for slow and how fast? If we're going to time 30 seconds, what number would I have to say to be a fast internal clock?
The ARIDE training curriculum gives plus or minus 5 as what's considered normal. So if someone says stop and the time is anywhere between 25 and 35 seconds, that's considered a normal internal clock.
Okay. My client was at 34 seconds. 33, 34 is what Sergeant Gable said. Is that a normal internal clock?
Yes, based on the training curriculum, that is within normal time estimation.
Okay. Now, my client's time estimation was normal, 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 normal. Based on my client's normal time estimation and the other information in this chart, and we're focused on narcotic analgesics now, can we make a determination as to whether or not Josh was under the influence of a narcotic analgesic?
No, the time estimation actually contradicts that he's under the influence of a narcotic analgesic.
Explain that to me.
The ARIDE training curriculum tells that officers that if someone's under the influence, their time estimation should be slow for a narcotic analgesic.
So slow meaning what? He should have estimated time would have went very slow for him. He would have said 12 seconds or 15 seconds or 18 seconds.
Time would be slow for him, and example would be he would tell the officer stop, and he's well past 35 seconds.
Okay. So he's counting in his head, and he's counting 1, 2, It's going slow. So the officer's looking at his clock and it's 30, 35, 40. In this case, Josh does not evidence that. So can we rule out narcotic analgesics as something that's influencing his body at that time?
I still wouldn't quite rule it out yet, but it's definitely a red flag in my head as an officer going through everything else.
Where would you go next based on, where should we go next trying to determine whether or not Josh is under the influence? Can you tell the jury what general indicators are?
Absolutely. General indicators would actually be the bottom portion of the drug symptomology chart or the matrix. And those are just observations that an officer makes. They're not based on an actual test like the top part of the matrix is. The top part of the matrix is all based on results from actual tests. General indicators, the officer's just observing things going on with a driver. Some examples would be, body tremors, eyelid tremors, stuff like that.
I'm going to show you Defendant's Exhibit B. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
That is actually the full A-ride drug matrix that includes the top portion and the bottom portion.
Okay. I'm going to put that on the television here. The jury can see it. All right, so that way. How's that look? Can you see that?
I can see it because I have a screen in front of me, yes.
Oh, okay. I don't know if the jury can see it. All right, should I pull it up a little bit, you think, or? Okay.
All right, stop.
Stop and pull the plug? I'm good, I'm good. Blurry? All right. Tell us what this is again.
That is the actual full version of the A-ride drug matrix. That includes the top portion, the major indicators, and then the bottom portion, which is the general indicators.
So let's say that, well, let's go with Josh. Are you, maybe we'll start with depressants. Can we do that? Can we go through and see whether Josh exhibited any of these behaviors?
I can, based on Sergeant Gable's information.
All right. Based on this drug category matrix, can you tell me if Josh exhibits the indicators that would indicate that he may be under the influence of a depressant?
Based on the sergeant's information, out of all the indicators on there, only one was present under CNS depressant, and that was the lack of convergence.
Okay.
Nothing else.
So just one of those.
One out of the entire row.
Would that allow you to reason that he is not under the influence of a depressant because he's not exhibiting all those symptoms?
Correct. I mean, he doesn't have to exhibit all of them, but just one out of all of them would definitely be problematic to give the opinion he's under the influence of that.
Let's talk about those. I mean, we may not all know somebody who's drugged up, but we all know someone who's had too much to drink. The general indicators are what?
General indicators are just subjective observations that an officer can make.
So what are the general indicators for alcohol? Let's say, based on that, it'd be reduced ability to divide attention.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Let me have you read those for me.
Okay. It could be reduced ability to divide attention, disoriented, sluggish, thick slurred speech, drunk-like behavior, droopy eyelids, fumbling, relaxed inhibitions, slowed reflexes, uncoordinated drowsiness, and unsteady staggering walk.
Now, in order to exhibit the behavior of a drunk person, I don't have to show every one of those, right?
Correct.
But likewise, just having one of those, say I'm disoriented, that shouldn't be enough for you to say, oh, he's drunk.
Correct.
Well, let's focus on what we're really talking about here, narcotic analgesics. Well, let's go through them all. Stimulants, how many does he show for stimulants?
Based on Sergeant Gable's report, just 2 out of all those.
Which 2?
body tremors and leg tremors.
So based on that, he's got two potential clues for stimulants. Still not a whole lot, huh?
Yes, 2 potential indicators, correct.
How about for hallucinogens, like huffing?
Um,
Oh, no, hallucinogens are like LSD and acid and stuff?
Correct. Based on Sergeant Gable's report, just 1,
Which is?
muscle tremors.
Can I ask you something? Can fear cause muscle tremors?
Yes,
So if someone's really, really scared, they can literally shake?
of course.
And sometimes maybe that symptom or that indicator can be attributed to a substance when really it's a result of fear. Is that possible?
It is possible. That's why an officer shouldn't make a determination or arrest just based on 1 indicator.
Okay. Dissociative anesthetics. How many does Josh indicate for that type of drug?
Based on Sergeant Gable, 1, which was the lack of convergence.
Okay. Let's skip narcotics, go to inhalants. How many have you got for that?
Based on Sergeant Gable's information, 2.
Which are?
A lack of convergence and confusion.
Likewise, can a traumatic incident cause confusion?
In my experience as a law enforcement officer, absolutely.
So if I were, say, run over somebody and be involved in a terrible accident, you might expect that I would be confused?
I have experienced drivers before that have been in a very serious accident who were confused, shocked because of the situation.
So you wouldn't automatically attribute that to someone being on drugs. You would take into account the fact that something traumatic had happened.
Yes, you would have to factor in a lot more than just confusion and lack of convergence.
Weed, cannabis. Let's talk about what those general indicators are. A lot of us probably can recognize those too. What are they? They're available to us.
Once again, there was only 2 based on Sergeant Gable's information.
Okay. They are?
A lack of convergence again, as well as tremors, body tremors.
Let's talk about all of them real quick to see how accurate these indicators are. What are the indicators that law enforcement might look at to see whether somebody's high on weed?
One would be a reddening of the conjunctiva, which is a fancy way to say bloodshot eyes.
Okay.
The odor of marijuana. Marijuana debris in the mouth. One thing an officer will do is have someone open up their mouth, stick out their tongue, look for debris. Body tremors, as was mentioned. Increased appetite. Relaxed inhibitions. Disoriented. Possible paranoia. Problem with time and distance perception. And then eyelid tremors.
These seem to be kind of right on. Where do these come from? Where do all these indicators come from that we can rely on them?
They come from the ARIDE training curriculum, which NHTSA pulls it from like medical books.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the big one, narcotic analgesics. The government says that Josh was high on narcotic analgesics. Based on the general indicators, what indicators does Josh exhibit, according to Sergeant Gable, that would lead you to believe he's under the influence of narcotic analgesic?
Based on the general indicators, the bottom portion, there's 11 general indicators that support narcotic analgesic, and Sergeant Gable only reported 1, which was low, raspy, slow speech.
Okay. In order to know how somebody speaks, whether speech is low and raspy, might it be necessary to know how they normally speak?
That would be helpful. I mean, I've heard someone before that I thought had low, slow, raspy speech, and I didn't know what their normal talk was, but it'd definitely be helpful, of course.
Did you have an opportunity to listen to my client speak in his discussion with Sergeant Gable on the video you watched?
I did.
Do you agree with Sergeant Gable's opinion that my client had low and raspy speech as it's meant in the general indicators?
No, based on what I could hear on the audio, or the video, he did not appear to have low, slow, raspy speech.
So based on your evaluation of Sergeant Gable's work and observing my client, he had no general indicators that would lead you to believe that he was under the influence of narcotic analgesic.
Based on general indicators alone, that would be correct. I did not agree with the low, slow, raspy speech. But even if we gave Sergeant Gable the benefit of the doubt, that's still just one general indicator out of the 11.
Okay. Based on that information, would you agree with Sergeant Gable's opinion that my client was under the influence of this type of drug?
Well, the only two indicators that the sergeant saw was that supports narcotic analgesic is constricted pupils, which I mentioned earlier. It was during the daytime. As a matter of fact, in Sergeant Gable's report, he put in there he wasn't sure if it was from the natural lighting or substance. So I agree with that. And then, of course, the low, slow, raspy speech. So those are the only two things that support narcotic analgesic based on the matrix.
Okay. A couple more questions for you. I'm going to talk about your report here in a moment. Hit the button here, or I can't. It's underneath. That's fine. Here we go. Thank you, sir. We're going to talk about your report, but I just want to talk about some things that Sergeant Gable told us yesterday. You're familiar with the standardized battery of tests?
Very familiar.
What does standardized mean?
Standardized means it's done the same way to every driver, by every officer across the country.
And what are validated, and there's three of them, right?
Yes, that's correct.
You've got the HGN,
Correct.
the walk and turn, and the one leg stand.
Correct.
Are there clues that are utilized in scoring these tests?
Yes.
If Sergeant Gable testified yesterday that he doesn't rely on clues in scoring these tests, but rather a totality of the circumstances, would that be in conformity with the training that NHTSA provides?
That statement is partially correct. I mean, officers are trained to factor in the totality of everything, but that includes how someone performs on the standardized field sobriety test, the clues.
Do the clues have, is there a reason they're there?
Yes.
Okay, so like on the HGN, there are possible 6 clues.
Correct.
Can you gain information that's useful in determining whether or not somebody is impaired by the number of clues that they exhibit on that test?
Absolutely.
Is it easy as saying 4 is good and 6 is better and 2 is bad? And how do you score something like that?
There's standardized scoring that officers are trained to use. That's part of the standardized field sobriety test.
So if Officer Gable testified there's not standardized clues or standardized scoring, he would be incorrect?
Correct. There's standardized scoring for HGN, the walk and turn and one leg stand.
Okay. What's the standardized scoring for the HGN?
It would be 4 out of 6.
So if my client exhibited 0 out of 6, could we say that he passed the HGN? Is that the kind of word you'd use?
Well, for drugs, you wouldn't say pass. You would either say it was present or not. And like I said, you'd be able to instantly eliminate drug categories on it not being present.
But 4 clues is the number that NHTSA has put on it to say, okay, if you have 4 clues, it's present.
Correct.
If you don't have 4 clues, it's not present.
Correct.
Okay. Let's talk about the next test that you did, the walk and turn test. Now that's a divided attention test.
It is.
Is that the most accurate divided attention test in the 3-test battery?
But there's only 2 tests that are divided attention, and out of those 2 tests, no, it's the least reliable out of the 2.
Okay. How many clues are available in that test?
8 total.
And if my client exhibited 3, according to Sergeant Gable, exhibited 3 clues. How many clues do you need on that test in order to say that he failed the test?
Only 2.
Okay. So in that particular test, he had 3, so we can call that a fail.
For lack of a better word, it'd be simple to say failure. Yes.
There is a more reliable test out there that does that test the same type of thing, right?
Correct.
And that test is the one-leg stand.
Yes, the one-leg stand is more accurate, more reliable.
And if my client, you observed my client's one-leg stand, didn't you?
I did.
How do you do on that?
I agree with the sergeant. He displayed one clue.
And how many clues are required on that test to say that he didn't pass the one-leg stand test?
2.
So he passed that test.
Yes.
So in the words of Meatloaf, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Would you agree with me?
I'm not familiar with that quote, but I would agree passing 2 out of 3 wouldn't be bad.
Okay. So you had a chance to observe those as well, did you not?
Yes, I observed the performance of the walk and turn and one-leg stand.
And on the modified Romberg, my client got the timing right, did he not?
Correct.
It seemed to me that Sergeant Gable made an arrest decision during the finger-to-nose test. It looked to me like Josh was using the wrong hand. What are your thoughts on the finger-to-nose test as a indicator of impairment?
Hold on. Can you back up?
Yes, sir.
It doesn't matter what the attorneys think. Ask him a question about what he thinks.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
You just phrased it as, I think, and it
Oh,
seemed to me,
well,
and
I apologize.
it's his testimony.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Can you tell us what the finger-to-nose test is?
I can. It is a divided attention test. It's not one of the standardized field sobriety tests. And officers receive training on that test once they go through the drug recognition expert training program. And their training is to use that test during a DRE evaluation in a controlled environment. None of the training teaches officers to use that test out in the field.
So if that test is used in the field, that would not be consistent with how it's supposed to be used.
Correct.
It's supposed to be used back in a controlled setting.
Correct. Like I said, the only training is during an eval, DRE eval, in a controlled environment.
Can someone not following the conditions required for a test affect the validity of that test?
Of course. I mean, if a test isn't used the way it's designed to be used, you can't be quite sure of the outcome or the results.
I imagine in a controlled setting, that type of test may be a little bit easier for someone to perform as opposed roadside, police cars, ambulances, blood. Those are things that we can't control, right?
Absolutely. One of the main purposes of doing it in a controlled environment is to eliminate outside factors.
So outside factors can make somebody guess the wrong hand, left and right. They kind of get screwed up.
I can say that outside factors could cause someone not to focus on what they're supposed to be doing because of what's going on around them.
It's a focus test, right?
Yes, they have to be able to concentrate and focus on instructions and on commands.
Do you think it was improper or not advisable that this test was done by Sergeant Gable in the field?
I don't think it would give reliable results because of it being done out in the field instead of in the controlled environment as it was designed to be.
Okay. And what do you base your opinion on that this is supposed to be in a controlled environment and not out in the field? Where'd you get that from?
I base it on the NHTSA training curriculum. That's not my specific opinion. That is based on the training curriculum.
while we're waiting for a clean copy, we need to get that highlighter up there. I'm going to take you somewhere else real quick. Officer Gable talked a good deal about rigidity and the fact that my client exhibited rigidity. He said his hands were balled up and that it was really, really tight. And Officer Gable actually thought that might be an important indicator of impairment and that would make it hard for him to drive if he's that rigid. What does rigidity have to do with the tests that were done on my client and the findings that we have?
Rigidity would be a general indicator. One of the drug categories, like a CNS stimulant, it could cause someone to have muscle rigidity, but it has nothing to do with someone's ability or inability to operate a motor vehicle. It's just one of those clinical indicators that someone can't control that could help an officer possibly point towards a certain drug category.
Now, body tremors, if they're caused by drugs, are they involuntary?
Yes.
In this particular case, my client exhibited body tremors during certain tests, but didn't exhibit them during other tests. Would you agree with me on that?
Based on Sergeant Gable's report, that is correct.
Why is that of importance?
Because it's out of the ordinary. If somebody is displaying body tremors and it's the result of drug impairment, it would be consistent throughout the entire investigation. It's uncontrollable. Someone can't turn it off and turn it on and make it go away. So it's out of the ordinary for an officer to see it maybe during one test and not during another where it should be there.
Okay. So it doesn't make sense that those body tremors would be attributable to drugs if he could turn them off and turn them on.
Correct. That's very out of the ordinary.
Now, body tremors, rigidity, could those also be caused by extreme fear?
Body tremors could. I'm not quite sure about rigidity, if that would be caused by fear, but definitely body tremors.
So I'm going to show you Defendant's Exhibit C. Can you recognize that for me?
Yes, I recognize it.
What is that, sir?
It is a copy of the report I provided to your firm.
Okay. Can you, based on the information you evaluated, based on your review of all the evidence that you had a chance to look at, were you able to come up with some conclusions in this case?
I was.
I'm not going to ask you for your opinion just yet, but I will. But what findings did you make in this case? What conclusions? I'm referring to, I think, your executive summary. You know what? I am going to ask you your opinion. Do you have an opinion based on your training, based on your education, based on your experience, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty as to whether or not my client, Joshua Gaspar, was under the influence of alcohol and or drugs of abuse or drugs at the time of this incident?
Object.
I didn't hear the ruling, I'm sorry.
He agreed.
Okay. Yes, I do have an opinion.
What is your opinion?
Based on Sergeant Gable's information that he provided, based on and applying it to the training curriculum, my opinion is there wasn't enough information obtained and observed to say that Mr. Gaspar was under the influence of alcohol, a drug, or a combination of both.
Okay. And your executive summary basically is what we've already talked about.
Yes, my executive summary explains the opinion, which is us going through that drug symptomology chart, that matrix.
Take that back. Thank you. No further questions?
sir. How are you?
I'm well, ma'am. How are you?
You were asked quite a few questions about the chart over there, correct?
I was.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Quaker Jordan. We haven't spoke or met before, have we?
Not that I know of, no, ma'am.
Okay, sir. You were asked some questions about the chart behind us, correct?
I was.
And you indicated that came from A-RIDE, correct?
Correct.
And that's an A-RIDE assessment, correct?
An A-RIDE matrix, yes.
Matrix.
Assessment would be fine. That's correct.
And so if Sergeant Gable used standardized field sobriety test and DRE, not A-RIDE, would that chart apply?
No, the DRE chart would apply, not the A-RIDE.
Thank you. Okay, so let's spend some time talking about what Sergeant Gable actually did.
Okay.
In your report that you completed. Now, was your report completed with the understanding that Sergeant Gable was using A-RIDE?
Yes, he did not perform a DRE evaluation unless I was not given all the information.
Well, the full DRE wasn't performed,
Okay.
but he did use the techniques out of DRE, correct? Some of them.
Yes, which is A-RIDE.
And if he testified in the fact that he wasn't using A-RIDE, but more so standardized field sobriety, and beginning the DRE portion, how does that reflect on your report?
I would say, unfortunately for the sergeant, he gave false information because you can't use DRE unless you're doing a DRE evaluation. What he used was A-RIDE.
You can't use any of the tests from the DRE?
Not unless you do a DRE evaluation in a controlled environment, then you can say it's a DRE investigation.
Didn't say it was an investigation, but you're
Okay.
saying, absent completing a DRE, no DRE test can be used. Is that what you're testifying to?
No, what I'm testifying to is if they don't do a DRE evaluation and they do exactly what Sergeant Gable did, other than finger to nose, that was based out of the A-RIDE training curriculum, the exact tests he did.
So, you said you are NHTSA trained and have done NHTSA instruction, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you aware that NHTSA specifically says that standardized field sobriety tests are not pass and fail?
That is correct. That's why I said lack of better word when
Well-
Mr. Sin used that terminology.
What does NHTSA actually say is the evaluation tool for the test?
I don't understand what your question is.
Okay, NHTSA says standardized field sobriety tests are not pass or fail.
Correct.
Correct? How does NHTSA say you are supposed to actually evaluate standardized field sobriety tests?
Based on the standardized scoring criterion that I talked about.
Standardized scoring criteria,
Correct.
which is what?
For HGN, it's 4 out of 6. For walk and turn, it's 2 out of 8. For one leg stand, it's 2 out of 4.
So at the end of all of that, does NHTSA give you a total number of indicators or clues that must be present across all the tests for impairment to be present?
No.
Doesn't work that way.
No, you would factor in most reliable to least reliable.
What do you mean by that, sir?
What I mean by that is HGN's the most reliable test.
Okay.
So obviously, in my opinion as an instructor, if someone displayed 4 out of 6 for HGN, but aced the walk and turn and one leg stand, I, as the officer, would go with the results of the most reliable test.
NHTSA has the most reliable test?
Yes,
The least
HGN.
reliable test, correct?
Correct.
And I think at one point in time you indicated that the one leg stand was more reliable than the walk and turn, correct?
Yes, based on the mid-90s studies that came out.
So why is it still included in the NHTSA manual? Why do we still use it?
Because those are the 3 standardized field sobriety tests.
So it is still a standardized field sobriety test that's recognized and can be used in assessing impairment, correct?
Of course,
It is still considered reliable, correct?
absolutely.
In addition to the money that you received for coming down here to testify, did they also pay for your travel expenses?
In addition to my fee, yes, the travel was covered.
And you said you have been an expert witness for some time now, correct?
Since 2008.
And you, I'm assuming, testify both for state and defense?
I have.
How many times for each side?
I couldn't give you a number for each side. When I was in law enforcement, I testified all the time as a police officer because of my assignment.
Well, I'm talking about during your time as an expert. Let's focus on that. How many times
Okay.
have you testified for the state versus how many times you testified for the defense?
I don't know how many times for the defense, a total number. I can tell you it's 100% for the defense, though I just can't tell you what the number is.
So as an expert, you only have testified for defense?
Correct. I've been consulted on a couple, but I haven't had to testify for the state because the case was disposed of prior to me having to testify.
So 100% for defense when you testify as an expert?
Correct.
Let's talk a little bit about your time experience as a patrol officer. You said you've done DUI arrests thousands of times, correct?
No, that wasn't the question. The question was how many times I did field sobriety or how many times I did investigation. That was thousands.
Thousands of times you've done a DUI investigation or a field sobriety test.
That is
Out of
correct.
those thousands of times during your time as law enforcement, how many of those were related to drug impairment?
A smaller majority than alcohol.
Okay, smaller majority related to drug impairment than alcohol. Out of those smaller majority that was related to drug impairment as opposed to alcohol, how many of those involved methadone impairment?
I couldn't give you a percentage on that because I couldn't even tell you how many would be on narcotic analgesics. And as an officer, we're only trained to give a drug category, not a specific drug.
Well, let me ask the question a different way, though.
Okay.
Did you do drug recognition examinations as an officer?
Yes.
Did you have a rolling log as an officer when you did your drug recognition examinations?
Yes.
Out of those rolling logs, how many came back for confirmed methadone?
I don't know.
No clue whatsoever.
No, I couldn't give you an exact number, no, ma'am.
You said one of NHTSA's primary functions is highway safety, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Why is that?
I don't know why they were given that role.
But highway safety is important, you would say, correct?
It's extremely important.
And NHTSA teaches that highway safety is important, correct?
They do.
Following too closely in violation of highway safety?
Objection.
From the laws I know, following too closely is a violation of the law.
Driving in the berm of a highway that's not an actual lane, is that in contradiction to highway safety?
Yes.
Now, you were asked some questions about defense exhibit, I think it's A, the pupilometer card. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. Is that still up there, sir?
No, well, let me check on it. Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay. And you said that's actually produced by a private company, correct?
Correct.
It's not something that's required to be provided to everyone in the A-Ride training, is it?
Not the pupilometer card, no.
No. So if an officer doesn't have that, it's just simply because they haven't purchased it, correct?
The pupilometer card, they haven't purchased it or the training academy hasn't given it to them, which oftentimes training academy purchase it and give it to the officer.
Oftentimes, but not always, correct?
Correct.
Are you aware of what training academy Sergeant Gable went through?
I am not.
So you have no way of knowing whether or not his training academy provided that pupilometer card?
Other than the fact he said he didn't get it, and I have no reason not to believe him.
Right. Is it required when doing standardized field sobriety tests or doing some sort of drug assessment to have a pupilometer card that's provided by a private company?
Not the pupilometer card, no.
And what is expected is that you have your training experience present, correct?
Yes, and then apply it to the matrix, correct.
So the pupilometer card and matrix are kind of just like a cheat sheet to help you if you don't remember your training, right?
Well, the matrix is provided. Not the pupillometer card. I just want to make sure that there's no
Okay.
confusion in that.
My
That,
apologies.
the matrix is part of the A-RIDE training,
Matrix is part of A-RIDE training.
correct?
Is the matrix taken out on every field sobriety test, and is it used like a little checkbox system?
I don't know if every officer does that. It's recommended for them to do it, to help them out, but it's not required. Because like you said, it's a cheat sheet.
It's a cheat sheet. And as an instructor, would you expect an instructor to need a cheat sheet?
There's nothing wrong with it.
That wasn't my question, sir. I said, would you expect an instructor who's actually teaching the class to need that cheat sheet?
It doesn't matter. I mean, it's a cheat sheet. It's to help somebody. There's nothing wrong with having it, whether you're an officer on the side of the road or you're an instructor.
Nothing wrong with having it, but also nothing wrong with not having it and using it, correct?
If you don't need it, there's nothing wrong with having it. If you do need it, then you should have it.
Now, you were asked some questions about time estimation. Do you recall that?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you be surprised to learn that Sergeant Gable said he actually did consider time estimation? Would that change your opinion?
It would change my opinion about what?
Well, you said you had concerns that he didn't consider time estimation.
I had
correct?
I had concerns based on the way the question was asked to me.
Oh, okay. If Sergeant Gable considered time estimation, but also considered under other factors associated with the Monfort-Romberg balance test, would you still have those same concerns?
I wouldn't, because that would mean that he used the test the way it was supposed to be, factoring in time estimation and everything else he documented.
Now, why do you factor in things that aren't these indicators or clues? Why are other things considered?
I don't know what other things you're speaking of, ma'am.
Well, you were asked some questions about some of Sergeant Gable's other observations. Do you recall that?
Like muscle tone and rigidity?
Correct.
Yes, ma'am, I was asked about that.
Why are those things also considered?
Because those are on the drug symptomology chart or matrix to help an officer consider possibly someone being under the influence.
So out of the indicators or clues that are actually connected to the standardized field sobriety test, are other indicators also supposed to be considered?
The general indicators, yes, ma'am.
The general indicators. What are some general indicators?
All the indicators that we talked about, the muscle tremors, eyelid tremors, disoriented, bruxism. I mean, there's probably about 100 different general indicators that fall on this cheat sheet, if you will, to help officers.
So officers are actually supposed to consider all of these things, correct?
Correct. That's how it helps or guides them to determine if someone's under the influence or not.
So if Officer Gable said he considered all of these things as part of the totality of the circumstances, would that make sense to you?
Yes, they're supposed to consider in the totality of everything.
Why are they supposed to consider the totality of everything?
That would help them make a correct opinion.
Now, you were asked some questions about the tests administered by Sergeant Gable and the fact that based on the results from those tests, you could not classify the drug type. Do you recall that question?
I'm not sure if I recall it specifically like that. Can you repeat it for me?
Sure. When Attorney Sin had the board up here, he went through and started marking things off, saying based on Sergeant Gable's observations, this isn't present, and this isn't present, and this isn't present, and this isn't present. Do you recall that?
I do recall that.
Okay. And he said, well, based on our observations, you can't classify which category would have been present. Do you recall that question?
I do.
Okay. But it's not required that something be classified in order to form an opinion on impairment, is it?
Not as an A-RIDE only officer. As a DRE officer, they're required to figure out a drug category.
But we would agree that a DRE wasn't completed on this, correct?
I absolutely agree with that.
Okay, so it's not required for impairment for a category to be specified if no DRE was performed, correct?
I agree with that.
You were asked questions about whether Sergeant Gable did the HGN and VGN and LOC test properly. Do you recall that question?
Yes,
And you reviewed all of Sergeant Gable's tests, correct? Because you watched the video?
I did.
Did Sergeant Gable provide the instructions and administrations of those tests properly?
He did, in my opinion.
So no issue with how the tests were administered, correct?
Correct.
You were asked a question about the number of indicators that have to be present. Do you recall that, or that are present?
Yes.
Is there a specific set number of indicators or clues that have to be present to show impairment?
No.
So there's not like a total at the bottom of the sheet that has to be hit in order to say, if I have 10 out of 70, that's impairment. It doesn't work that way?
Correct. That's why I agreed with the totality of everything.
Now, you said you are NHTSA trained, correct?
I did say that.
And are you familiar with NHTSA fact sheets?
I'd have to see it to see if I was familiar with it.
Okay, may I approach, please, Your Honor?
Yes.
Can we approach, please, for a moment, Your Honor?
Yes. Aaron? Ladies and gentlemen, you can stand up in place. Barnett, you were the ringleader. Are you all comfortable now?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sir,
Yes, sir.
how's your last name spelled?
P-A-L-A-C-I-O-S.
Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Sir, just a few questions before I show you the exhibit. Are you fully NHTSA trained?
I have taught every NHTSA course as far as impaired driving is concerned. that's available to police officers.
Do you review their materials on a consistent basis as they're updated?
Yes.
And is that part of keeping your certifications and training current?
I would agree with that.
Can approach, please, Your Honor.
Yeah, I'm going to object. He indicated he's familiar with impaired driving, and that's,
You may approach.
Thank you, Your Honor.
thank you.
I'm handing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1701. Can you just take a moment to review this document and see if you're familiar with it, please?
Okay.
And have you reviewed that, sir?
I have.
And are you familiar with it?
I'm familiar enough to say that it's not part of any of the impaired driving training curriculum provided to officers.
Okay. Have you seen that document before?
I don't recall if I have read this or not.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, sir, in conjunction with some of your training with NHTSA, have you ever been required to review drugs and humans performance fact sheets?
I'm not sure if I understand the labeling that you're giving to me.
Can I approach, please, Your Honor?
Yes.
Same objection, Your Honor.
Rule.
Sir, you're trained to detect drug impairment, correct?
Correct.
Do you ever receive training on the actual drugs themselves?
Officers receive training on drugs themselves, but to put in a drug category, one of the 7 drug categories.
Hand you what's been marked for identification purposes. It states Exhibit 1702 from NHTSA. Can you
Okay.
please review that?
I can.
Thank you. And sir, do you recognize that NHTSA document?
I recognize that enough to say that also is not part of any of the impaired driving training curriculum that's provided to officers. It may be for the toxicologists that NHTSA provides training for, but not for law enforcement officers.
Well, as it relates to methadone observations, what training is provided by NHTSA in terms of impaired driving?
Primarily the drug symptomology chart that I've been talking about most of the afternoon. Methadone, officers receive training that methadone falls under a narcotic analgesic, and that if someone's under the influence of narcotic analgesic, here are the major indicators, here are the general indicators.
You were asked some questions in regards to can fear cause muscle tremors. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Can muscle tremors also be caused when fear is not present?
Yes.
You were asked some questions about whether or not arrest should be made based on just one indicator. Do you recall that question?
Yes.
And how many indicators should be present for arrest to be made?
As I answered previously, when you asked that question, there's no set number of indicators that need to be there. The officer, as I agreed with the sergeant, saying he factored in the totality, would factor in the totality like I did when I factored in the narcotic. I mean, the sergeant just saw constricted pupils, and he said in his report that could have been because of the natural lighting, and all he had was low, slow, raspy speech, and in my opinion, that's not enough.
You were asked some questions about whether or not the driver could be confused or in a state of shock after a serious crash. And you testified you've seen that before, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you also seen somebody that's not confused after a serious crash?
I'm sure I have.
Have you also seen somebody that's not in a state of shock after a serious crash?
I'm sure I have. I don't feel comfortable saying I never have, so I'll just say I'm sure I have.
So it's possible that somebody can not be confused and not in a state of shock because of a serious accident, correct?
I would agree it's possible. Based on my experience, I would say it's not probable.
Mr. Palacio?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned a couple times the slow, raspy speech.
Yes, sir.
Are you utilizing that determination based upon what the Trooper Gable found, or are you basing that upon your actual listening to the recording and observing the testing?
It was in the sergeant's report that he heard slow, raspy speech.
Okay, so it's not from something that you determined, that you're going off his result?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
You were asked some questions about the finger to nose test, correct?
I was.
What is that test intended to gauge?
Someone's ability to listen to instructions, follow instructions, and divide their attention. Do more than one thing at one time.
You reviewed the defendant's performance on the finger to nose test, correct?
I did.
What were your observations of that test?
He did not follow instructions.
Anything else you were able to observe from the finger nose test?
Well, elaborating on he didn't follow instructions would be he didn't use the correct hand during every command given by the sergeant. And he did not immediately put it back down as instructed. I could not determine, based on the distance of the video, if he used the tip of his finger and touched the tip of his nose, as the sergeant said he didn't. So I'm not disputing that at all.
Did you review the sergeant's report in regards to the result on the finger to nose test?
Yes, that's why I said I'm not disputing what his findings were.
Based on the sergeant's findings, how would you rate the defendant's performance on the finger to nose test?
He did not perform well.
What do you mean?
He didn't use the correct hand, as the sergeant implied. He was hesitant, putting his finger back down from his nose, as the sergeant documented. And once again, I could not confirm or deny if he touched the tip of his finger to the tip of his nose, because I could not see the distance, based on the distance of the video.
And in order to form your opinions and your testimony today, you reviewed the video of the standardized field sobriety test and Sergeant Gable's report, correct?
That is correct.
Did you review anything else?
I did not.
And you're not making any sort of, there's no supplemental report or anything else associated with your report, is there?
Correct.
One moment, please, Your Honor.
Yes.
concern. Can someone still be impaired and not exhibit all the signs in the category?
Yes.
Can you explain that to me, please?
Yes, the training curriculum tells the officers that all indicators do not have to be there. Just as I testified, there's no magical number of what the officers are looking for. That's the whole concept of based on totality of the circumstances.
And can you tell us what a polydrug use is?
I can.
You said you can?
Yes, I can.
Can you please explain?
Polydrug use is when somebody uses more than one drug category at a time.
And can that cause antagonistic effects?
It can.
Can you explain that, please?
I can. A good way to explain that is using an example of if someone took like a CNS stimulant and a narcotic analgesic. A CNS stimulant dilates the pupils. Narcotic analgesic constricts the pupils, so if they mix those two drugs together, the pupils could be dilated, they could be constricted, depending on what drug's stronger at the time, or they actually could be normal because they're fighting each other, I guess is the best way to put it.
What are some types of CNS stimulants?
Cocaine, amphetamines, all type of prescription amphetamines, methamphetamine.
Is caffeine a CNS stimulant?
Yes, that would be considered a CNS stimulant.
Can I approach you, Your Honor?
Yeah.
Sir, what's on the screen is State's Exhibit 1435. Can you see that, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And in the top right-hand portion of the screen, can you see this can? Oh, well, I have to touch it. Very sensitive screen. Can you see that can?
I can see a can.
Do you recognize what that can item is?
I recognize it as a can. I can't read what substance is in it. I don't know if you can make it larger or not.
State's Exhibit 1438. And with the court's permission, can the witness step down, Your Honor, please?
Yes.
Sir, please step down, please.
Of course.
Do you see this can in the bottom middle portion of State's Exhibit 1438?
Yes, I do.
And what is that can an item of, sir?
It appears to be a Monster energy drink.
Let me have a seat. Now, can I approach please, Your Honor?
Yes.
Is that the can from the car? Objection, Your Honor.
You said a Monster energy drink, correct, sir?
Yes, in that picture, that's correct.
Are you familiar if there's any caffeine in those energy drinks?
From my understanding, there's a lot of caffeine in those drinks.
When was the last time you administered a DRE exam?
The last time I taught the course, which would have been sometime early spring this year.
And you administered the exams as part of teaching the course?
Correct.
Okay. Now, if the defendant had caffeine and narcotic anesthesia in his system, then was Lieutenant Gable correct in narrowing the categories down and not being able to stick to one category?
First of all, to answer your question, I have never personally, nor have I seen any officer ever suspect someone was under the influence of caffeine. But under this hypothetical, caffeine being a stimulant, narcotic being or methadone being a narcotic, the pupils would be normal, or should be normal. That caffeine could explain the body tremors, because body tremors are part of the general indicators for a CNS stimulant. I don't know how much caffeine someone has to drink in order to be impaired by that. I've just never investigated someone for caffeine impairment.
So under NHTSA training and the antagonistic effect of drugs, can the combination of two separate categories predict an unpredictable result?
Of course.
Cause an unpredictable result?
Of course.
Now, you said as part of your report preparation, you actually reviewed all of Sergeant Gable's report, correct?
Yes, the police report was like 3 or 4 pages, I guess.
Okay. And throughout his report, did he have a number of different indicators or clues present?
Yes.
Can I approach, please, Your Honor?
Yes.
Handy what's been marked for identification purposes, the State's Exhibit 649. Can you review that item for me, please?
I've reviewed it.
You reviewed it. Okay. Let's walk through State's Exhibit 649. Can you tell me the indicators that are present throughout Sergeant Gable's report?
I can.
Is that Sergeant Gable's report?
I apologize. Is that Sergeant Gable's report, sir?
Yes, this is the copy I
Is
received.
that same or substantially similar condition to the report you reviewed in developing your report?
That is correct.
Okay. What is the first indicator that you see in Sergeant Gable's report?
The first indicator, reading down his report, would be the sentence that says Gaspar's eyes appeared constricted, but due to the bright sunlight, wasn't clear whether it's from the light or an impairing substance.
Okay. What is the next indicator that Sergeant Gable observed?
The low raspy speech.
What is the next indicator that Sergeant Gable observed?
So we went into the field sobriety, or the sergeant went into the field sobriety tests. It would be during the walk and turn. Sergeant Gable documented leg and body tremors.
Do we miss lack of convergence?
We may have.
It's a little bit higher up in that second paragraph, first full paragraph of the second page.
Yes, he put it with HGN.
So lack of conversion?
Was present.
And what was the next indicator?
It was for the walk and turn was the leg and body tremors.
And our next indicator would be?
Indicator would be on the one leg stand. Arms were very rigid. Fists clenched tightly. And then leg and body tremors again.
What's the next indicator?
During the modified Romberg balance, once again, the rigid or body was stiff and rigid, and the fists tightly clenched, the leg and body tremors.
I want to go back to the second full paragraph. The indicators or clues off the walk and turn. Did you skip those?
I talked about all the indicators, like you asked me to.
Okay.
I can add the
Can we go over
clues.
indicators and clues? My
Of course.
apologies, sir. Okay. What clues are also present?
With a walk and turn, steps offline, Mrs. heel to toe,
I'm sorry, Miss.
Mrs. heel to toe, and improper turn.
Okay. What is the next indicator or clue that we see in Sergeant Gable's report?
You have the clue for the one leg stand, which is sways.
What's the next indicator or clue in Sergeant Gable's report?
Okay, I've already mentioned the ones for the one leg stand, modified Romberg balance. I've mentioned those as well, so we're down to the finger to nose.
Now, in the modified Romberg balance, would the rapid pulse also be another indicator or clue?
Yes, that could be considered an indicator.
Okay. Rapid pulse can also be an indicator or a clue. And what is our next indicator or clue that we see?
Down to the finger to nose, they're not considered clues or indicators, but like observations would be him not, Mr. Gaspar not using the correct hand.
And how many times has he not used the correct hand?
I believe it was 3.
Okay. Are there other observations from the finger to nose test?
He did not immediately bring his hand back down. And he touched the bridge of his nose.
What is the next one?
Next paragraph was Mr. Gaspar was arrested.
I didn't hear that last part. I apologize.
After that, he was arrested. After the finger to nose.
There were no observations about hovering the finger over the face or things of that nature? Double tapping the nose? Did you see that in the report?
I did see that in the report. That's not part of the training curriculum, but if Sergeant Gable considered double tapping an observation, then that would obviously be on it. piece of paper you're typing?
So you and I can agree that Sergeant Gable had quite a few observations or clues of potential impairment from the defendant, correct?
Correct. Some of those are obviously the same ones typed over and over and over.
But they were noticed at different points in time, correct?
That is correct.
Throughout the various tests that were administered, correct?
Correct.
So multiple times we see some of the same indicators or clues, correct?
Yes, he does.
At various different stages throughout the testing procedures, correct?
Yes, the sergeant does.
One moment, please, Your Honor.
Yes.
Nothing further at this time.
Mr. Sen?
Okay, sir. This was going to indicate that Josh was under the influence of all 7 drug categories, correct?
1, 2. I wouldn't say it indicates he's under the influence of every drug category, but
What's the correct terminology? Impaired?
no, those are indicators from each one. It's 1 or 2 indicators from each one of the drug categories.
Okay.
I'm comfortable saying that.
Okay. But the state of Ohio is alleging that Josh is impaired by methadone. That's a narcotic analgesic.
Yes, it is.
Right? I don't think they're alleging that he's under all this other stuff because we haven't been talking about it. And we do have a blood test here that was done right after. Are you aware of that? We have a blood test?
Objection. The indictment says or combination thereof.
Counsel, please approach Mary.
Sorry, I misspoke. I misspoke. The state can allege that Josh is under all the drugs. So I want you to consider all the drugs, not just narcotic analgesic, okay?
Okay.
Because it would be misleading if I were to talk only about narcotic analgesic and you said no, but you really knew he was under the influence of something else.
Okay.
Okay? Can we do it this way? Can we just add all these up and say, cumulatively, we can tell based on all of those he's under the influence of drugs?
No, once again, that is a list of 1 or 2 general indicators of every drug category on the entire matrix.
Well, let's talk about all the drug categories. I think we're going to allege all of them. Give us the first one.
CNS depressants.
Based on your training, education, and experience, do you have an opinion as to whether or not Josh was under the influence of CNS depressants?
I do have an opinion.
What is your opinion?
Based on what Sergeant Gable collected and reported he is not under the influence of a CNS depressant.
What is the second drug category, sir?
CNS stimulants?
Based on your training, education, experience, and your review of all the evidence, do you have an opinion as to whether or not Josh was under the influence of CNS stimulants?
I do have an opinion.
What is your opinion?
Based on the information that Sergeant Gable collected and reported, Josh was not under the influence of a CNS stimulant.
What is the third drug category, sir?
Hallucinogens.
Sir, based on your training, education, experience, do you have an opinion as to whether or not Josh was under the influence of hallucinogens?
Objection, Your Honor. Can we approach, please?
No.
Do you have that opinion, sir?
I do have an opinion.
What is your opinion?
Based on Sergeant Gable's information he provided, Josh was not under the influence of a hallucinogen.
What's the fourth drug category, sir?
A dissociative anesthetic.
Sir, based on your training, education, experience, do you have an opinion as to whether or not Josh was under the influence of a dissociative anesthetic?
I do have an opinion.
What is that opinion, sir?
Based on Sergeant Gable's information he provided, Josh is not under the influence of a dissociative anesthetic.
Mr. Sen?
Yes, sir. What is the fifth drug category, sir?
Narcotic analgesics.
Based on your training, education, and experience, do you have an opinion as to whether or not Josh was under the influence of a narcotic analgesic, including methadone? Do you have that opinion?
Yes, I do have an opinion.
What's your opinion, sir?
Based on Sergeant Gable's information he collected, Josh was not under the influence of a narcotic analgesic.
What's the sixth drug category, sir?
Inhalants.
Sir, based on your training, education, and experience, do you have an opinion as to whether or not Josh was under the influence of inhalants?
I do have an opinion.
What's your opinion, sir?
Based on Sergeant Gable's information he collected, Josh was not under the influence of an inhalant.
What's the final drug category, sir?
Cannabis.
Sir, based on your training, education, and experience, do you have an opinion as to whether or not Josh was under the influence of cannabis?
I do.
What's that opinion, sir?
Based on the information that Sergeant Gable provided and collected, Josh was not under the influence of a cannabis.
No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Jordan?
Sir, you said this list is not the way we determine, correct?
It's not the way what, ma'am?
We determine impairment, correct?
Those are indicators that are put into the matrix to help determine, yes.
Can you explain to me then what totality of the circumstances means?
It means factoring in everything that's collected, putting it in this cheat sheet as you described it, and helping the officer figure out. And if I'm in any way implying that one or two indicators for every drug category is a correct arrest decision, factoring the totality of circumstances, that is not what I'm trying to insinuate or imply at all.
But an officer should be considering all the observations they make of a defendant based on the totality of the circumstances, correct?
Correct. Whether...
Yes or no, sir?
Correct.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Have a safe trip back.
Thank you, Your Honor.
It's time of the day. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to stop here. The next witness may be a lengthy witness, and there's no sense in having you start today and dread it, okay? So if you're back downstairs tomorrow morning at 9:15, that'll be good. Shouldn't be any problems with absent folks. Shouldn't be any problems with Interstate 71, all the things that have been going on. So keep in mind, don't discuss this case and let anyone discuss it with you, or your presence, no form of express an opinion, no investigation, no media, but do have a great evening. We'll see you back tomorrow at 9:15.
All rise.